Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the Astrology of June 2025. Hope that you're having a wonderful afternoon out there. We're going to be going on a deep dive with June here. We're going to be talking about lunations, full moons, new moons, ingresses of planets into new signs, solar phases. We've got a Jupiter Cazimi coming up this month. We've got some malefic enclosures to stay tuned for. And we've got a pretty important out-of-bounds planet this month as well. So you're going to want to stay tuned. Before we get going, we're going to welcome a few friends here. Welcome, my friends. Thank you so much for stopping in today. Rachel Fletcher, my good friend Rachel Fletcher, stopping in from Roanoke, Virginia. How you doing, Rachel? Nice to see you. Hope everything's going well your way. Tracy Chaplin says, hello, everyone from West Sussex in the UK. Nice to see you, Tracy. Nice to see some of our international friends here as well. All right, we're going to be diving in, but before I do, I want to make a few announcements. Of course, we're talking Astrology of June 2025 today. Thank you so much for joining me live today. Really appreciate that. Make sure you let me know that you're here. Leave me a comment in the chat here today. But if you want to be able to reach out for a reading or for a class or anything of that nature, you can find me over at spencermichaud.com. If you click on the Book Now button, you can schedule a reading, whether it's a mythos natal reading, where we combine the astrological signs, the houses, the decans, tarot, fixed stars, numerology, whatever kind of divinatory system we need to get to the heart of whatever is on your mind. You can find that over at spencermichaud.com on the Book Now button. Also do timing readings, and I have some classes coming up as well. One of which is going to be offered on June the 14th with my beautiful partner, Tanya Andrews of Third Coast Mojo. We're going to be doing the Dignity and Devotion Jupiter webinar at 1 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, June the 14th. It's going to be exciting. The Greater Benefic is going to be moving into Cancer this month. What a beautiful time to study the deity Zeus and all of the significations associated with that. We're going to talk about the mythology. We're going to talk about how to work with Jupiter in your chart, whether it's in a place that is fortunate or one that might be a little bit challenging. We have some interesting perspectives on these planets because Tanya has Jupiter in Cancer in its exaltation, and I have Jupiter in Virgo in its exile. So really unique kind of a synchronicity with that, and we can kind of talk about Jupiter from different perspectives potentially. So I hope that you'll join us for that on Saturday, June the 14th. You can also find Tanya over at Third Coast Mojo. She has all sorts of wonderful products that are magically elected over there. Here is an Ocean of Abundance Jupiter and Pisces offering. She's got all sorts of stuff though. Jupiter, Mercury, if you're getting into Gemini season, you want some Mercury materia, she's got that over there. Some really great stuff. Solar materia, Mars materia, anything that you might need. So go check her out on Etsy at Third Coast Mojo. You can also find me at my newsletter. So if you go on the website, spencermichaud.com, or if you click in the description of this video, you can click a link to sign up for the newsletter, and that helps you know when I'm going to be going live, when I'm offering new classes, when there's new readings, offerings, etc. And you can get a 10% discount off of anything that I offer. So make sure you sign up for that. And then finally, if you want to support the channel today, you can purchase a super chat with a little $ in the chat today, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com and support the channel that way. It really helps me keep the lights on. I do a lot of prep for these live streams, so this helps me buy the gift of time and resources and all of the equipment and all of the software that goes into this. It's really helpful. So thank you so much for those of you who are able to contribute today. Okay, got our announcements out of the way. We got another friend stopping in. Teresa is here. Hello, Teresa. Says hello from New York City. Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well, my friend. That's a new face, and I'm excited that you're here with us today. Hey B is here. Pachaga, New York. Oh my goodness. Two New Yorkers here today. So nice to see you. Hey, hope everything's going well over there in New York. All right, my friends. Let's get down to business. To defeat the Huns. No, I don't know what we're trying to defeat today, but distraction? Trying to defeat distraction, maybe? let's talk about some big picture thoughts for the astrology of June 2025. Uh, we have a really interesting month ahead. I think that the benefic planets are going to be gaining a lot of dignity. Both Venus and Jupiter are going to be moving into Venus into her own sign of Taurus, where she has all the resources she needs to thrive. Jupiter moving into its exaltation in Cancer, which is really exciting, where we are able to bring things together and promote healthy growth within our lives. Now, there are some caveats to that. There's some challenges to Jupiter and to Venus, to be quite honest with you, with a square to Pluto, and Jupiter with the square to Saturn. We're going to break both of those relationships down today, but I think that that's good news. I would rather have challenging astrology with benefics that are in good shape, that are able to help out a little bit, rather than going through the challenging astrology with nothing helping. So I think that there's always ways to look at things and see the silver linings. We also have Mercury out of bounds from the beginning of the month all the way until the sun ingresses into Cancer. So we've got a month ahead that could feel a little mercurial. And by mercurial, I mean like there's just a lot of questions. There's maybe a little bit of a pinch of chaos here and there. There is a lot of questions that we're going to be asking and trying to figure out how to make sense of all this, all these experiences that we're going through. And Mercury out of bounds, there could be some communications that we have that are outside the norms of our regular communication styles, or outside of what is socially acceptable at various times as well. Another thing to keep in mind this month is we have a Jupiter cazimi happening as well. So Jupiter is going to be renewed in the heart of the sun. In addition to moving into Cancer, it's going to move into Cancer, and then it's going to go through its cazimi. So that's really exciting. Those are some of the, I think, the light side or the positive side. We've got some challenging things in the chart today, or this month, I guess you could say. We have both Sun and Jupiter going into malefic enclosure at various times for the month. The Sun is going to be fairly temporary. That's only going to last for maybe a week and a half or so. But the Jupiter one, we're going to kind of strap in and buckle in for a couple of months of Jupiter being in malefic enclosure, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. I was looking at the chart and I was like, really? Is that what we're going to experience for that long? And then I got some confirmation from that. I was looking at my solar return in this honeycomb planner that I really enjoy. And sure enough, there's Jupiter. It says maltreatment by enclosure. And I was like, oh man. So, these we're going to break that down, and we're going to show you exactly what that means. A malefic enclosure is when both Saturn and Mars are aspecting a planet and kind of hemming it in without any help from any other planets. Usually we don't experience this as long or severely because other planets come and intervene. And the only intervening planet we're going to have for Jupiter for a number of weeks is the moon. So we might have some on and off malefic enclosure, but that's going to last all the way until August. So we will try to break that down and prepare you for that. There's also a point in the middle of the month where we have a couple challenging aspects. A Mars-Uranus square and a Jupiter-Saturn square happening on the same exact day. Mars from Leo to Uranus in Taurus, and then Jupiter in Cancer being squared by Saturn in the overcoming position. So we'll talk about that today too, because that seems like an inflection point. That is going to be happening near on a weekend where there's some events in America in particular planned. Believe that there's a parade being planned for the commander-in-chief that weekend. So some things to keep an eye out for potentially, with some challenging aspects from these two planetary pairs. Okay, so those are kind of the big picture overarching themes that I have my eye on for the month. So let's kind of take that like medium range view. So let's talk about our lunations, and I'll just give you some dates. So lunations are any new, full, quarter moons, etc. So we're going to have a first quarter moon on June the 2nd at 12 degrees of Virgo. So that's going to be the Virgo moon squaring the Gemini sun, trying to bring something into fruition, to turn an idea into something physical and something real, and the challenges that go along with that. We're going to have a full moon on the 11th of June at 20 degrees of Sagittarius. That's a third decan Sagittarius moon, which talks about carrying heavy burdens and trying to get something across the finish line and maybe needing to delegate a little bit. We have a lot of ideas that we want to bring into fruition, but we're not always able to do everything all at once all the time. And with the last gasp of Jupiter and Gemini, as I'm recording this in May, it definitely feels like there's a lot of things going on. It's like, man, just so many different directions we could head and so many different projects that we want to work on, but you only have so many hours in the day, and that can be both challenging and frustrating, but ultimately we can make some choices and try to figure out what we want to bring into being. Then finally, we have a last quarter moon on the 18th of June. That's going to be at 27 degrees of Pisces. So the third decan of Pisces, helping us to let go of maybe some dreams and visions and maybe some emotions that aren't serving us in that moment as we make choices to move further towards the summer solstice. As we move towards the summer solstice, all the exploring that we do in Gemini, which over the course of June, we're going to be experiencing Gemini season and then the beginning of Cancer season. All that pollination, that visiting of different flowers to collect information and pollen, etc., we've got to do something with it. We've got to kind of let go of some of the options that we've been exploring so that we can bring something that is most important to us into fruition. So that last quarter moon at 27 Pisces on the 18th of June will be very helpful. And then finally, we have the new moon on the 25th of June at 4 degrees of Cancer. And this new moon follows the Jupiter Cazimi on the 24th. So we're going to get an infusion of energy into Jupiter in particular the day before, and then we're really going to be able to start planting the seeds around that information that we get at the new moon at 4 degrees of Cancer. Ingresses this month. So ingress is a fancy word for a planet moving into a new sign. So we have a number of ingresses. We have Venus moving into Taurus on the 6th of June. We have Mercury moving into Cancer on the 8th, and then Jupiter following suit into Cancer on the 9th. So lots of shifts towards Cancer at the beginning of the month. That's a big one too. The Jupiter moving into Cancer is a big one because Jupiter only changes signs every couple years here. Sometimes it's a little quicker than that, but it's one that doesn't change signs every few weeks or few months. So really might feel the shift in that. And the good news with that is we're moving from Jupiter being in a place of exile in the mercurial sign of Gemini and into a place of exaltation. So a real leap from a challenged Jupiter into one that is really able to work on its own agenda a lot easier. Now, I say that with an asterisk because Saturn in the overcoming square from Aries is probably not going to make things as easy as we'd hope they would be. But again, there's going to be some good stuff and then there's going to be some challenging stuff. And that's kind of how life works. Mars is going to be moving into Virgo on June the 17th, moving out of Leo and that kind of retrograde cycle that we've been going through since, I don't know what, December, where we had the retrograde in Cancer. And so this is going to be traversing some new ground into Virgo. And we're going to be, getting out of that old story that we were experiencing with the Mars retrograde through Leo and Cancer. And then we also have the summer solstice this month on the 20th, where the sun moves into Cancer. So a shift, a changing of direction for the sun by declination. It's instead of continuing to climb higher in the sky, it's going to start to descend. So we might experience some reversals around that summer solstice, and we have to work through that. And then finally, Mercury is going to move into Leo on the 26th of June. So these are all planets that will go into new signs for you personally as well, and new topics and new houses. So shifts of focus whenever we see a planet changing sign, and we especially want to take care of and look at what the dignities of those planets are. All right, let's see, we got some more people stopping in. Steven's here. What's up, Steven? Hello, everyone from San Francisco, originally from Long Island. All right, nice. We've got the New York crew here today. I love it. Chad Wiseman is here. Says Jupiter changes signs once a year. sometimes I believe that is slightly longer sometimes. I think that it's not exactly a 12-month cycle, but I could be wrong with that. Rachel says, thank goodness, love Mars and Virgo. Well, I also am somewhat partial to Mars and Virgo, since that is where Mars is in my chart. It can be challenging sometimes, though. We can be kind of our own worst enemy as far as perfectionism goes. But yes, Steven says, Mars and Virgo, get stuff done. Absolutely. We try to do our best. He's looking forward to Mars and Virgo on the 10th. Absolutely. It's going to be a welcome change, I think. Cookerzilla's here. What's up, Cookerzilla? Nice to see you. Stopping in from Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia. It's been a while, my friend. I hope everything's been going well your way. Thank you so much for stopping in today. All right, so we've gotten our ingresses. Let's talk a little bit about solar phases in our medium range viewpoint. We have Uranus emerging from under the sun's beams. Now, this is a little bit of an interesting mashup of traditional and modern technique. Since Uranus is a non-visible planet, a non-traditional planet, I'm not sure it does the same phasis or omen that would speak as it emerges from the beams, but I thought I would throw it out there to see if there was something we could pinpoint as far as Uranian things in our life sending us messages. So that's on the 4th, and it's emerging from under the sun's beams at 28 degrees of Taurus. On the 4th, again, this is an interesting handoff. Jupiter goes under the beams. So we have Uranus emerging from the beams at the same day that Jupiter is going under the beams of the sun at 28 degrees of Gemini. So this handoff happens quite a bit in astrology. It's really interesting to see like these simultaneous movements that are omens that it feels like one can be triggering another as far as the symbolic meanings associated with it. On the 12th of June, Mercury is emerging from under the beams as the evening star at 6 degrees of Cancer. So we should get some messages that are important about what we need to feel nurtured around that period of time. And then on the 24th, we have Jupiter making its conjunction with the sun, which is called the Cazimi moment, or being in the heart of the sun at 3 degrees of Cancer. A renewal for Jupiterian things, and probably a welcome, refreshing renewal after we've been experiencing Jupiter in its exile for quite a number of weeks, months, etc. So I think that this will be a renewal, especially for the topics associated with Pisces and Sagittarius in your life. So like, let's say you have a second house that is Pisces. If you are an Aquarius rising, maybe you'll get some information about your resources that will be very helpful for you moving forward. So it's important to make those connections, those mycelial connections, those underground connections between where the planet is, in this case in Cancer, and what it's feeding in your natal chart. On the 30th, we have Mercury entering its retrograde shadow at 4 degrees of Leo. So we will have a Mercury retrograde coming up in July. So we want to kind of start to wrap our heads around what that might mean for us with a retrograde in Leo. Okay. All right. Let's see. Cookerzilla says, would love to hear more about third decan Sagittarius finishing at 29th degree progressed Sag Sun this year. Oh my goodness. Sag for my entire life. Looking forward to Capricorn. We'll talk a little bit more about third decan of Sagittarius today when we talk about the full moon in Gemini. So we're going to have a full moon right there at that third decan. You know, really third decan talks a lot about carrying heavy burdens, carrying a weight, feeling compelled to push our bodies to the limits to get something done. The third decan of Sagittarius is something that we usually, that we see every year right before the winter solstice. So think about the sun trying to get to the finish line so that it can start climbing again in declination in the sky. So we got to get to the end of something so we can make a new beginning. That's what Sagittarius 3 feels like. And it's a Saturn-ruled decan, so it's something where we're really feeling the weight of our responsibilities. That's why we talk a lot about delegating with Sagittarius 3s. We don't want to try to take on too many burdens, or that can lead to the name that Austin Coppock calls it in 36 Faces, which is a horse's skull. I mean, think about the centaur and the horse's skull, right? Like, we can grind our body into bits in that deck, and so we have to be careful about that. Scarlett Marosa. Hello, Scarlett. Nice to see you. Says definitely need the renewal. Cancer. Absolutely. Yeah, for those of us who have Cancer placements, myself included, with Sun and Mercury in Cancer, I think having Jupiter conjoining our Sun or whatever we have in Cancer would, it's a welcome change. I think those of us cardinal signs been going through some stuff, and definitely still going to be challenged with Saturn, but it's nice when a benefic is hanging out there too. Steven's got that full moon on their ascendant. Yeah, it will be a busy summer for sure, Steven. Okay, so we've talked about our solar phases. Now we have our out of bounds planets, and then we'll talk a little bit about our malefic enclosures after that. So the month starts with Mercury out of bounds from June the 1st to June the 20th, the rest of Gemini season, basically. So this is when a planet is moving outside of the normal path of the sun and how far away it goes above or below the ecliptic. Symbolically, we can think of those outer bounds planets as sort of maverick planets that are working outside the normal constraints of what is socially acceptable, outside the realm of the king. So you think about things that are ruled by Mercury, the sign Gemini, planets in Virgo. We may see our Virgo and Gemini placements or friends or political figures acting a little bit outside the norms, saying all sorts of shocking things potentially if we haven't been experiencing that already. So this could be one where we're feeling a lot of communication. We might have some ideas, though, that are outside of the normal neural pathways that we would normally travel. That can be the real advantages of these out of bounds planets. Sometimes it helps us to think outside the box. So that might be something to think about with this placement here. The moon is going to be out of bounds from June the 9th to June the 14th, and then also again from June 22nd to June 27th. Moon out of bounds periods, oftentimes we push our bodies beyond their limits. Sometimes we're feeling very emotional. We can feel very sad. We can feel very happy, just wider swings of emotion. I've noticed in the last few months, as I've been doing a gardening project, that the moon out of bounds periods coincide with me pushing myself a little bit too hard out in the garden, and then having to really take it easy for a few days afterwards. So sometimes it can be like, you're not able to do the things that you would normally want to do because of a circumstance that either you created for yourself or that you were just a victim of, I guess. So good to keep those things in mind and to go easy on yourself. The last thing that we have in our kind of medium range viewpoint is the malefic enclosures of the Sun and Jupiter. So again, we talk about malefic enclosure as a planet sort of hemmed in by the two malefic planets, Mars and Saturn, whether it's through aspect ray on one side or the other, or through bodily enclosure when they're on either side, degree-wise. So we're going to have a shorter malefic enclosure of the Sun from the 5th to the 17th, from 14 degrees of Gemini to 27 degrees of Gemini. So take a look at that placement in your chart. See if you have any planets there or anything like that, because the Sun could be lighting it up. There's feelings of frustration that we can have sometimes, potentially. We are in the midst right now of a mercurial malefic enclosure. And I'll tell you, one of the experiences I've been having the last couple of days as Mercury has been in its malefic enclosure is I have a hard drive that started to fail, that was not being recognized by my computer. And it had basically all of my memories and videos and pictures and things of that nature. And I've already lost one hard drive like that in my life that was very traumatic, because it had all my music on it that I'd recorded at live shows from my 20s, from the 10 years that I was recording during my 20s. And it all just kind of disappeared. And you'd think I would know better to have more than one external hard drive by then, but for whatever reason, I didn't have it. And I've had one in a box for a couple weeks now, and I busted the new one out, and I was like, oh, this one isn't going to get recognized. And I finally I had to get it out an old computer to transfer these files because that was the only computer that would recognize it, etc. So a lot of really moments of anxiety as far as like communications, information, technology with Mercury in malefic enclosure. Now with the sun, it can be more about our feelings of identity, our feelings of sense of purpose, our conscious awareness of our goals could feel a little stuck. We could have extra challenges to overcome. And then Jupiter going through that malefic enclosure, which starts on the 26th of June and goes all the way until August the 1st. So we have almost a little over a month of Jupiter in malefic enclosure all throughout the month of July, really. You know, our faith, our hope, our ability to bring projects together to completion could be challenging. So that's something that we'll talk more about when we get to that point in the broadcast, when we're talking about things in greater detail. But I think it's important to keep that in mind, and especially also keep in mind that that can also have an effect on the Sagittarius and Pisces topics in your life too. So look at things from like a trio of topics. Look at the Cancer house, okay? Like I'm looking at a chart here, just a random chart that is Leo rising. And Jupiter is going to be in the 12th house, and it's going to be providing resources for the 5th and the 8th house. And I'll show you this when we get to it, but I'm just speaking very briefly about this. So 12th house, self-undoing, wanting feelings of solitude, wanting to take a time out from the world, liminal spaces. And you may feel like you aren't getting the liminal space. You aren't getting the rest that you desire because of challenges from the 5th house of either children, creativity, legacies that you want to pass on, and potentially the 8th house topics of money of others. All of those things could be affected by the malefic enclosure from Saturn in the 9th and Mars over there in, I believe it will be in Virgo once that happens. Once the Mars moves into Virgo, that's when we have the malefic enclosure. I will explain that in much more detail with visuals as we go further in the broadcast. But I'm going to check in with all of you here again. In the chat, we got an active chat today. I love it. Benell Dell's here today. What's up, Laura? Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well. Hope everything's going well with your move and transition lately. Scarlett says, yeah, that square doesn't look easy, but feeling the need for change, hopefully healthy change. Yeah, I'm feeling it too. I've been really thinking about how to create renewal in my life, and I've been trying to change my environment around me, doing a lot of gardening. We've been planting a lot of flowering and fruiting trees in our yard, native pollinator plants. That's been exciting. I've been playing a lot of guitar lately again and trying to shake up my creative juices. So I'm feeling that. I think that this might be going around. So I think that there's a lot of benefits that we can get even with pressure in our lives, socially, politically, family pressure, work pressure. Sometimes that pressure can turn the coal in our life into a diamond, hopefully. Tracy says, can you look for out of bounds moon in solar fire? I need to track this for sure. I think that you can. I am an Astro Gold user, Tracy, so I'm more familiar with Astro Gold, and you can definitely track it in Astro Gold using the sheets function where it will show you the declination. So if you search for declination, what you're looking for is 23 degrees and 26 minutes of declination, either north or south of the ecliptic. So when I go through it, I look for anything that is greater than that number, north or south. Astro Gold has a way of like turning the declination purple when it's out of bounds, which is very, very helpful. So I'm pretty sure that solar fire is a fully functional astrological tool. So I imagine that there's definitely a way to do that. Chad says, Spencer, are you a Fish fan or a Deadhead? You know, that's funny because I never really been sort of a jam band person. But I will say this past couple weeks, as Mercury has been squaring, as Venus has been activating the Mercury-Pluto square in my chart, which can often lead to me going on really deep dives with some kind of obsession. I've been really getting into Blind Melon and Shannon Hoon recently. I've been kind of doing research on his life, and he just fascinates me as a tragic figure, but also as a singer. And I've been going kind of on this deep dive. I really highly recommend the documentary All I Can Say, which is a collection of his home videos that he recorded before he passed away at the age of 28. He recorded his life like almost obsessively for about 5 years before he passed. And I've just been really enjoying just getting into just to see a glimpse into that time period and into his life as an artist. And I'm sad that he's gone, but I'm really excited that material exists and that he left his mark on the world. So I know that that's not Fish or the Grateful Dead, but I think that that's what's been really inspiring me lately. So yeah. Let's see. Cookerzilla says, Spencer, Pisces Saturn has been a 3-year-long purge. Lots of old artwork in that purge too. I truly believe getting rid of things gives permission for the new to come in. Absolutely, Cooker. And I think that this is something I've been feeling quite a bit too. I've been feeling just that feeling of overwhelm that you get with Jupiter in Gemini, I think, is part of it. And I've been just looking around like, I just feel like everything is very full. And sometimes we have to empty our cup out to be able to make space for things in our lives. I've been learning this as a gardener. Like, we had all sorts of vines that were overgrowing and all of these things in the space that we wanted to plant our new trees. And much of the work that went into planting that new garden was not the planting of the new, it was the removal of the old. We had to pull out a whole pile of concrete, like that was, and not a small pile. We're talking multiple hundreds of pounds of concrete that were just dumped in a corner, and old vines that were taking over. So I agree that we think a lot about growth in our society and Western civilization, but I think we try to avoid thinking about loss, thinking about death, thinking about composting things and letting go of things. And I think we'd live happier and more balanced lives if we did. So I think that, yes, I agree 100% with the statement. Hello, Kate. Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well, friend. Painted Turtle is here. Hello. Nice to see you, Lauren. Hope you're doing well. Happy Friday, friends. Lauren says that tech disruption has been real. I wonder if Uranus going into Gemini might make great innovations in things like hard drives and thumb drives that can help get the air gap devices outside the cloud. Yeah. Here's what I'll say about that. Don't have all your most precious files and memories in just one place. I'm really looking into like more different types of storage. I don't know if it's cloud-based or having multiple hard drives or whatever it is, but I just can't have the stress of like, oh no, is the hard drive going to fail today or whatever it is? Because this week has been a lot of sticky moments, and transferring these files. There's like, I don't know, it's a couple terabytes worth of data on this hard drive. It's taken almost 2 days. It's going right next to me, so hopefully it'll be successful. Yeah. Hey, Dee is here. What's up, Dee? Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well. I believe Dee's joining us from over there in the UK. Hope everything's going well. Stephen is commenting that he was born with an out-of-bounds moon. Oh my goodness. It's 26 Sagittarius, so you're probably pretty familiar with that third decan territory. Chad says taping of concerts and bootlegging. You're referring to the Fish bootlegging? You have to give me some more context with that. You were talking, I think I was referring to all of my recordings. No, Chad, those were recordings of my own concerts. Like, I was a professional musician for a number of years, from my early 20s into my mid 30s, and I recorded all sorts of live recordings of my own performances, full shows, open mics that I did, a ton of covers that I only did once or twice, like that I'll probably never play again. Like, so it was an archive of my own life that I lost that was really painful. So yeah, and I'm sure that I had probably I grew up I went to college in the Napster era too, so I'm sure that there was some of those types of things too. But yeah, like always back everything up, friends, whether it's your own stuff or stuff that you don't want to lose. Positive Vibes is here. Nice to see you, Positive Vibes. Hope everything's going well your way. Cooker says South Node Virgo feels very active, participation and removal as well. Libra South Node felt more like the meat falling off the bone. Lacy hard drives are reliable. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, the South Node thing, we've had a lot of planets that are at the bending of the nodes recently. So we also will have the sun at the bending of the nodes this month upcoming. So the turning points, really, where I think a lot of these planets, as they go through the bending of the nodes through Gemini, they're moving towards a place of release. So I think that, especially when Jupiter went through the bending of the nodes in May, we were getting to the peak of all the options, all of the expansion of options. And I think now we're starting to like whittle things back down again, say, you know, I can't do all this. I need to create space in my life. So I agree 100%. 10 terabyte big hard drive is a sound investment. Yeah, I have a couple 8 terabyte ones right now from Western Digital. And I know that we're getting into the Virgo weeds here, but they only last a certain period of time, and you kind of got to swap them out every once in a while. But I digress. I think I avoided the worst case scenario this week. Thank goodness. And I'll tell you, I used some of the Mercury oil, both from Tanya's Third Coast Mojo and from Sphere and Sundry, the Copics. I used a Gemini oil from the Copics and it's called Master Key. And then I used a Virgo oil from Third Coast Mojo and anointed the computer and the hard drives when I was having a panic attack about the drive being corrupted. And it started working briefly to get these files off of there. So I recommend both of those magical boutiques, I guess you could call them. Okay. Yeah. Yep. I lost a lot of that stuff. It was tragic, but it's a lesson in not necessarily hanging on too tightly. As someone who has Mars and Saturn in the third decan of Virgo, Chad, that decan is a lot about legacy and what you want to pass on. And sometimes it feels like when I'm about to pass something on as a legacy, it just kind of disappears. Saturn and Mars do its thing and sever and separate me from that legacy. And I'm not exactly sure what to make of that, except for living in the moment and recognizing that castles made of sand wash into the sea eventually, right? If we want to quote Jimi Hendrix and believe that sandcastle magic. It's hard to hang on to anything, and even in this age where we feel like we're adding something to the cloud or to the collective, at any point this whole network of information could just completely be lost to the annuals of time. I'm thinking of things like the Library of Alexandria, where they thought that they were preserving that for thousands of years, and they did, and one authoritarian regime who didn't agree with it can wipe it out in one single moment. And it's sad, but I think that there are things that are eternal that may not be as detailed or as conscious, and it might just be life itself and the impetus towards life and expansion and contraction. I'm glad to hear, Lauren, you're I move in 2 weeks with no house. Oh my goodness. Well, you're flying by the seat of your pants there, Laura, but I hope everything's going well. Good luck with the move and hope everything shakes out for you. Paintings by Mare is here, coming in late from South Maine, 48 degrees out. Yeah, it's been chilly here too, Mare. It's been a really chilly spring so far, but I would kind of take the chilliness over a 90-degree spring at this moment. So I'm trying to appreciate it for what it is, but 48, that's kind of cold. Okay. I'm just active chat today. Thank you so much, friends, for being here and for your participation. Yeah, Lauren's going through that South Node purging. D says he's deep in the AI world on a 10-year-old laptop and a 10 terabyte drive. Sounds ace. Yes. Oh man, yeah. This is doing things on the old laptop is definitely much slower and more painstaking for sure. I had to get out my 15-year-old laptop basically to recognize this old drive for whatever reason. So we'll see. Heather is here. What's up, Heather? Nice to see you. Hi, Spencer and everyone. Came across an email in my spam box today from 4 months ago with a once-in-a-lifetime career opportunity that I completely missed. Check your spam, people. There you go. Oh, man. Well, maybe it wasn't meant to be this time around, Heather. And, sometimes I believe that the opportunities that weren't meant for us, sometimes we just are, there's some other force in the universe that might be looking out for us. And sometimes something that looks really good in the moment, when you look back on it, you're like, oh, there's a reason why that happened, because this other thing crops up. But I'm sorry that you missed that. And yes, check the spam filters. I should do that more often myself. I don't check my spam as much as I should. I actually have trouble keeping up with just my regular inbox. So that's good advice, friend. Okay. You all are awesome. This is definitely a Gemini season chat here. I love it. So let's start talking about the first decan of June. Okay, so we've got the sun moving through Gemini 2 from June 1st to June 10th. And I'm going to bring up the decans of Gemini here from my webinar that you can find at the store on my website, spencermichaud.com. If you'd like to purchase that, it's about a 3-hour webinar on all things Gemini. So there's all sorts of archives there for you to get more information if you want something that's a little bit more focused. So this decan, I always like looking where the sun's moving through, because that's sort of the canvas that things are being painted on. I will talk about the other decans as we go along, but giving the sun decan gives us sort of a focal point, right? A collective shared focal point. So Gemini 2, you can see here we've got the 9 of Swords tarot card. And we have a figure that's like up at night with anxiety, insomnia, sleeplessness. Book T calls it the Lord of Despair and Cruelty. Book of Thoth calls it the Lord of Cruelty. Austin Coppock calls it the Hermaphrodite due to the daimon Cybele, which was a deity or a god that had both sexual organs, but the other gods feared them and severed the two halves of them. And then Cybele was spending much of their existence trying to find their other half. I believe Attis was the other half that they were trying to find. So that gives us some really interesting insight into Gemini 2, where we may feel a little bit of anxiety about missing our other half, or trying to reunite the severed parts of ourselves. It's a Mars ruled decan. So that Lord of Despair and Cruelty, sometimes we can use our words as weapons. Sometimes we can also externalize our shadow. We all have parts of ourselves that are, the light side and the dark side, etc. If you are a Star Wars fan, you know that you choose whether to use the Force for good or for ill. But all of those things are part of a unified whole. And this decan of Gemini, it can be very, one of the traps and dangers of it is projecting our negativity out on some externalized force. And there is a need to unify and adapt those things, or to reintegrate them. So anxiety and irreconcilable thoughts, like we saw in Gemini 1, okay? Gemini 1, you saw the 8 of Swords with a figure that is bound, okay, that is paralyzed by all the new options. That was a Jupiter decan. And as we've been experiencing with Jupiter and Gemini, sometimes we have so many things that we could do that trying to make a decision as to what we want to pour our energy and resources into can be paralyzing. It can be really difficult. And here we see sort of the results of trying to, I don't know if it's trying to pare it down, but trying to figure out which direction to head into. I've talked a lot about with Gemini, with the myth of and the association with the 12th house and the thema mundi, which is a liminal space, a place before birth. The myth of talks about a Roman soldier that retains his memory in the afterlife and is witnessing people choosing lots as far as how they're going to incarnate into the next life, with all the understanding of the empowerments and the detriments that they're going to experience. And think of facing and knowing what you might experience throughout your entire life thus far. Usually in the Elysium fields, the fields of forgetting, I guess you could say, like we forget all the, if we believe in reincarnation the way that Plato describes it, we are forgetting all these past lives that we have so that we can learn some lessons in the next one. But imagine being able to remember all of those things and to know what kind of both joys and sufferings that you would experience, and then also having a choice of which ones you would experience. And then you can start to understand some of the challenges that we might think about with the Gemini experience. I am a believer that Gemini, while it does have some of the precocious qualities because of Hermes' prodigious nature as a child, its skilled nature as a child, I don't really necessarily agree that Gemini always represents like the child or the toddler. Sometimes I think Gemini can be, in some systems, it's the last sign before the renewal of the solar year. In the Egyptian system, that's what we're looking at. So I think that we can feel the weight of our choices in this sign, and especially in this decan. I have Venus here, and I feel this energy with the what you see with the Nine of Swords. When I have to make a choice about something I like, something I want, I desire. Whenever I'm like trying to find new clothes or new shoes, as a youth, I just had all sorts of challenges making a choice, and I would literally, my poor Piscean father, who indulged me a little bit more than he should, to be honest with you. But he would take me to all these different stores because I would be like, I need to know what the other option is before I make a choice. And part of that comes from a little bit of trauma from sometimes having experienced scarcity, because you know that you've got one shot at this. And as a child, I was like, I know I'm going to get a new pair of shoes, but I might not get a new pair of shoes for 2 more years, or however long before, I could convince my dad to get me some new shoes, because I basically would wear them or have to wear them until they just completely fell off my feet. So the weight of those choices sometimes comes from trauma. I would also say the weight of choice, and I'm speaking from my own experience and just sharing an anecdote from my own life that helps me contextualize this. When I was about 10 years old, my parents, after being divorced for a number of years, went to court over and had a custody battle. Like, my mom gave me up when I was about 5 to my dad, and I spent age 5, well, really to the rest of my youth with my dad. But when I was about 10, my mom got remarried, and she was feeling bad about that decision and wanted me to go live with her again. And I remember very vividly being pulled into like a kind of a psychologist room that was court sanctioned, and basically a psychologist being like, who do you want to live with? Like, and as a 10-year-old, that's a lot of pressure. Like that choice can lead, that type of choice, like who do you love more, is basically what you hear as a kid. And you understand that somebody is going to be disappointed if you don't choose them, right? And that can lead to the experience we see in the Nine of Swords of like just this anxiety, this stress, this trauma, this sleeplessness. And I remember that was a very, very difficult thing to go through as a young person. And it really makes me think long and hard about how my decisions are going to affect other people now, instead of just doing it very rashly, sometimes to my own detriment, to be honest with you. But I think that that's something that to think about with Gemini too, is there's choices that are kind of almost no-win situations that we get into in Gemini too often. So destructive thinking, mental torture, using your mind to create reality. Sometimes it can be negative though. Merciless speech and trash talk. That's an interesting one here. That's where we can get our words as weapons. Mars as the ruler of this decan is utilizing communication to sever, to hurt, to wage war. So we have to be careful of that when we're seeing things go through this decan. Inner turmoil projected onto an other. That's another thing that we were talking about earlier. Is it's very easy when we are feeling conflicted internally to try to externalize that and scapegoat. This decan is very has a lot of scapegoat tendencies or scapegoating tendencies. Now, having Venus here in this decan as well, I'm just speaking again from experience. One of the things that I've taken from those experiences is I've tried to become a peacemaker for people that were very different. Like my two parents were very, very different people. And I had to learn to walk that tightrope and try to see things from multiple perspectives. Like I had 5 different step-parents growing up. My parents went through a lot of different marriages and divorces. So I had to see all these different perspectives and try to harmonize within that. So it's interesting to see when you have a specific planet in this decan, how it can manifest differently. If you have Mars in this decan, it might not be as easy to unify your perspective and someone else's. It may be a source of pain. So questions to ask yourself when the sun's moving through Gemini 2. Are your thoughts becoming a prison? In the Latin Picatrix quote that we have here, we talk about a man that has his head in an iron helmet, right? An iron or a lead helmet, excuse me. No, it says iron. So regardless, a helmet that is maybe making it difficult, sort of like Magneto, right? Where it makes it difficult to hear outside communications or to outside influences. In some case, that can be protective, but in other ways, that can close us off from other perspectives. And when we do that, oftentimes we have the echo chamber of our own thoughts that can create a recurring cycle of negative self-reinforcement. Are you caught in the suffering between regret and fear? Okay, like regretting something that didn't happen and the fear of something that might not happen in the future or that something that will happen in the future. Is your inner turmoil causing you to lash out? Really important to ask yourself if you're having conflict with people, how do you examine your own role within that? And if there's something that you need to heal within yourself so that you're not placing that burden on others around you to suffer with you, you know what I mean? Or because of you. Can you explore the roots of your pain? Sometimes we have to go back in time, and like the story that I just shared, I've done a lot of self-reflecting about the roots of how and why I came to be the person that I came to be. Sometimes through examining my failures, sometimes through looking at my strengths, but I can trace it back to certain things in my life. And I think that's a valuable exercise to go through, whether it's the positive things in your life or the challenging ones. How can you break out of repetitive thought patterns? Okay. Important to be flexible. All right. Gemini is not a sign, and Mercury is not a planet that tends to give us all the answers to the test. It mostly asks us questions. And those questions can be the impetus to reflection and to change and to flexibility. And then finally, how can you reunite your severed halves of self? This is an important one, and it talks about that daimon or spirit Cybele and being able to reunite and integrate both the positive parts of your persona and the negative parts, and to own it, and then hopefully to heal it. All right, let's see. Stephen says Mercury in the 3rd is very Gemini. Yes, Stephen has Mercury in the 3rd house. Yeah, but Stephen, you're a Sag rising, right? So Mercury's not in Gemini, if I'm not mistaken. But it sounds like you might be overlaying the signs and houses a little bit with sort of like an astrological alphabet, which is one way to look at it, one perspective. D says, this is where my Saturn is, and in my 12th, a placement that nowadays I can see how it looked after me. Yeah, and Saturn is in its joy in the 12th house. So sometimes when we have planets in the 12th, they are going through a rebalancing. Saturn is a planet of nemesis, and nemesis was a goddess that restored right proportion through increasing that which is lacking and decreasing that which is excessive. So I look to my 12th house sun and Mercury, and of course with you having Saturn there, as those planets going almost through this, like, I don't know if it's a cleansing process or like a trial by fire or whatever you might view it as. But with Saturn there, it can lead to feeling comfortable in solitude. I think oftentimes when we have Saturn in that place, it's almost like, especially if Saturn is dignified, we can feel comfortable being by ourselves. Now, maybe with this placement with Saturn in Gemini, maybe our own repetitive narrative cycles could lead to some hardships. And examining all of those things and the way our own thoughts create our reality, co-create. I think that there's some things that we are able to create and some things that we are experiencing that the divine has a plan for us. And how do we balance those two things out? D says, trial, yes, exam after exam, challenge, but somehow I walk out unscathed. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, D. I think that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, right? So cheers to you, friend. All right. So let's examine a little closer, and let's take a look at I'm going to share my screen with you. So here is the beginning of our month, and this is June 1st, and the beginning of the month, we see Mercury out of bounds. Okay, so here's Mercury out of bounds from the 1st to the 20th. I think we've talked about that at the beginning of the broadcast, and just talking about Mercury as a maverick planet, right? Mercury is a planet that is not following the rules. So this could be related to communication, could be related to commerce, exchanges. I mean, think about all of the stuff we're going through with tariffs in the United States right now. Imagine once Mercury goes out of bounds. Like, I would say things like tariffs are mercurial in nature because they are a means of exchange. They are a tax on exchange. So when Mercury goes out of bounds, we could be experiencing exchanges that are very different from what we're used to traditionally. And maybe we experience that for a few weeks and everybody's like, this is terrible. And maybe the powers that be are like, maybe they hear that it's terrible and change course after it's over. But there could be some sticky moments with that. Now, on the plus side, on the positive side, Mercury could also be bringing us some ideas that are easier to not easier to digest, that are different from what we would normally experience. And sometimes when we are experiencing something outside of the box, that can break up a crystallized pattern of belief or a rut that we might find us in. So Mercury out of bounds can also sometimes lead us to ideas that could lead to a breakthrough. And think about that we have this Mercury out of bounds period, during and, while we have Jupiter Cazimi. So maybe an idea that we have that maybe comes through Hermes, we can start implementing through the Jupiterian Cazimi in Cancer. Astrology with Aaron. What's up, Aaron? Says, I have Saturn and Jupiter in Virgo on the 12th. I think with Saturn in his joy, there's a responsibility or duty towards inward reflection and the process of self-knowing. Absolutely. And sometimes solitude is the vehicle towards that. Okay, so let's keep going. So we've got Mercury out of bounds, 1st through the 20th. On the 2nd, we have the first quarter moon. So I'm just going to keep going through this so we can make it through in time for me to still have some blood sugar. When the broadcast goes later in the afternoon for me, sometimes we'll run up against dinner time here, and that's when I start to fade. But I've still got a lot of juice right now if I keep going. First quarter moon, 12 degrees of Virgo, the 2nd of June. This is, where we are experiencing. Let me just move it so you can kind of see it a little bit easier here. So this is 12 degrees or so of Virgo. There it is. If you think about all of those irreconcilable ideas that we talked about with the sun in Gemini, Virgo too is about really themes of how do we enclose ideas into form, into matter. So you may have a lot of different things that and projects and ideas that you might get, especially with Mercury going out of bounds. And then we have the moon saying, well, which of these are practical? Which ones do you want to encase into matter? Which ones do you want to refine? And how do we whittle down some of the options so that we can actually put our energy towards the things that are most important to us and to our highest priorities? So be careful of perfectionism when you're trying to manifest your ideas around this first quarter moon, but it can bring us the skills that we need, the practical skills and resources necessary to turn those ideas into a reality. On June the 4th, we have a busy day. So June the 4th, let's go to the 4th here. I'm going to go forward. So on June 4th, we have Venus making a sextile to Jupiter. Okay, so this is one aspect. Venus, Jupiter. We have Uranus emerging from under the beams. See how we have this kind of 15 degree or so arc of separation? Okay. And then we have Jupiter going under the beams of the sun over the course of that day. So I don't know if I can, yeah, here, let's, you can see this here. Here's Jupiter going into the beams of the sun within 15 degrees of the sun, getting ready for its renewal in the heart at the Cazimi at 3 degrees of Cancer. So let's see if we can contextualize all of those things. So Venus in Aries 3, Aries 3, it talks about using our charisma to win over a hostile crowd. Okay, that is Venus in its own face. We may have to have some communications with other people about the projects that we want to commit to. Jupiter going under the beams at 28 Gemini, a need to let go of some of the options that we have. Gemini 3 talks about sacrificing one of the twins' part of its immortality so that the other mortal twin can live again. So there may be a sacrifice that we have to make of some kind of imagined pathway that we can't possibly bring into manifestation. Uranus emerging from the beams, we're sort of mixing modern and traditional techniques here, but let's say that we can apply that traditional thinking to it. Maybe you will see a unique way to create some kind of healing or to make up for some mistake that you possibly made in the past with Uranus in the third decan of Taurus. You may also have to be patient with the process, but I do think Uranus and Taurus 3 can help break us out of crystallized routines, ruts, habits. It can help us to heal something that has fallen into disrepair or into corruption. I'm thinking about my garden. There's literally a gardener on the card associated with that, the Seven of Pentacles, who's contemplating how to remove the blight that he sees on his vines that he's growing. So that you may get some really interesting ideas and information about how to move forward and repair something in your life around this period of time. But with Jupiter going under the beams, that can be a challenge, right? Because Jupiter is sort of taking to its sickbed. In the medieval Renaissance way of thinking about this, the planet that was going under the beams of the sun, becoming invisible, is with the superior planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. It's an old Jupiter. It's an elderly Jupiter that is becoming ill and then getting ready to shed its mortal coil to be reborn into some kind of new body or consciousness. So you may be feeling very overwhelmed at this period of time. Too much and you say, you know, I can't do this anymore. I can't do all of these things. I need to let some of these things go. And this might be the moment where you start really releasing some of the things that just aren't going to come to fruition. And that's okay. This is one thing that you need to think about when you're going through these processes. It's okay to not do everything. It's okay to let some things go, even if at one point in your life they were very, very important to you, or brought you joy, or that were something that brought you meaning in your life. We all go through these changes. And I think that for practicing a little bit of self-forgiveness and self-care around those times when we need to let go of things that just aren't going to come to fruition is super important. Like, Tanya and I have been doing all sorts of projects this year with Jupiter and Gemini. We've been trying to change our entire landscape in our yard, in the back of our yard right now. I've been wanting to do things in the front, but I'm having to let that go. We've got all sorts of webinars that we're doing. We've got other projects that are on our minds, and sometimes you just have to create some space in your life so that you can do the things that are most important to you well, rather than constantly feeling like you're chasing, catching up, etc. Hustle culture is something that is exalted in late stage capitalism. It's never something that I've understood. Maybe this is the Taurus moon in me speaking, but I do not like being forced. I don't like being rushed. I like doing things on my own time. I like doing them well. I like, with all the Virgo parts of me, I like being able to really dive into them with detail. And it's another reason, like, for example, we're probably going to spend close to 3 hours together today. That's somewhat, I mean, it's not completely rare, but it's more rare than I think that you'd see in a lot of these types of things, because we don't have the attention span to dive into these things in depth and to be with each other for more than 5 minutes anymore, 30 seconds, whatever it is. And I think that's a shame. And I think that letting things go slower, really in experiencing something fully, it can only be done with a certain amount of things. That's the nature of the limit of time, right? And accepting that can bring, it can bring wealth to your life. And I don't mean just material resources. Wealth is something that is, I consider time wealth. I consider relationships wealth. I consider happiness wealth. Health is wealth. All of these things are an equation, that an experience of what it means to be fulfilled. And I think that since energy is never created nor destroyed, when you're giving up something, you are actually pouring something into another part of your life. When you're giving up a project that is stressing you out, you're pouring wealth into the health part of your life. You're pouring wealth into the time cup of your life. If you think about it that way, you will never feel scarcity consciousness, in my opinion. Like, that's truly the way out of that mindset, is seeing the abundance of multifaceted abundance. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that we don't need physical resources. We absolutely do. And yes, we are seeing a ridiculous wealth grab by the oligarchs in society right now. So I totally get it. I'm upset about that as well. But I'm trying to do what I can about that. And then I'm trying to accept some of the parts of my life and still try to find joy while I figure out how to be a part of whatever that solution is. Okay. So how do we do that and still work on the change that we need to make socially to bring about fairness and equality, while also holding on to some personal happiness? I think that's the balancing key. All right, we get to the 5th, and we have Mercury sextiling Mars. And this is really it seems like somewhat of a nondescript aspect, but I want to show you what that is going to set off. So here is Mercury making a sextile to Mars. And what this is doing, and I'm going to make this in purple, is it's going to set off the malefic enclosure, okay, of the sun. Because before Mercury makes the sextile to Mars, Mercury was breaking up the malefic enclosure, okay? So this is something that is, it takes a lot of concentration and focus, at least for me, to see these and to see how it all works out and how it's all manifesting in the chart. But Mercury is now outside of the ability to help in breaking up that malefic enclosure. That one is going to last from the 5th to the 17th, and it ends when Mars leaves Leo. Then it is not casting its aspect ray on that side of the sun anymore by sign. So what do we do with a solar malefic enclosure? Just like today, this week, when we've been going through, we went through a double whammy. We went through a Jupiter malefic enclosure and a Mercury malefic enclosure this week. They were both short. Okay, the Jupiter one only lasted a couple days. The Mercury one is still ongoing, but this is a backing things up, right? Slowing down. One thing that I've had to work through with this Mercury malefic enclosure, and I'm saying this so we can apply the same lessons to the solar one. Like when I'm working through a challenge with my hard drive, sometimes if we try to move too quickly when we're feeling this pressure, we can actually make things worse by doing something rash. And I've had to be very, very careful trying to retrieve these files, not to do something that would corrupt the disk even further or something like that. Here's another example of this. There were so many files on this hard drive that it took all day yesterday just to prepare them to transfer. And if I had been impatient with that, I could have been shutting it down, trying it again, and the process never would have played out. But I had to just leave it alone and let the process play out. And then today it started transferring, and now I'm just sitting here watching. I'm trying not to move it. I'm not going to mess with it too much. I'm going to let that process play out. I'm going to let Mercury be. Do you see what I mean? Same thing we can bring over to the solar malefic enclosure on the 5th. When we feel pressure from Saturn, well, maybe we have pressure of responsibilities, pressure of chronic conditions that have been happening for a long time. Here's an example of a Saturn chronic condition. I've known for many months that I need to back up my files onto this new hard drive that I bought probably at least 6 months ago. I've just been avoiding it. It's been a thing that I just haven't really just made time for. I should have made time. I look at it and I'm like, I should make time for that. And it's just one of those things that just hasn't happened. It's a chronic condition, Saturn. Mars comes in and makes it an acute problem. Mars came in and said, that drive will no longer be recognized by your computer. It's corrupt, So it's severed. It made it a chronic problem, an acute one. So do you see how when we're dealing with a planet that's going through a malefic enclosure, it's probably dealing with an issue that we've had chronically for a long period of time, and then Mars is making that issue have to be dealt with somehow. Even if dealing with it means doing what needs to be done and then letting that process play out. That is what I've learned from having planets in malefic enclosure. I also, newsflash, I have Mercury in malefic enclosure in my natal chart. And I'll tell you, that hasn't been super super fun, but it's not all bad. I mean, I feel like I have the ability to utilize Mercury. I just have had to do it in a unique way. Um, so I think that sometimes letting things be after you've done what you can do and then letting the process play out is the way out. It's not through battling your way and butting your head against a brick wall, or there is an I-Ching that talks about a ram that's butting its head against a hedge. And the more movement that ram makes, the deeper and deeper it gets into the bramble of thorns or gets stuck in the hedge. And I really feel like malefic enclosures could be that way. Is sometimes the more we wriggle, the more energy we're putting out there into trying to escape it, the deeper and deeper it can put us into the clutches of it. So you will have to determine what that means for you. What is doing what is necessary to move the process forward without doing too much that will get you stuck further within it. Good news about this one, it's short, right? But really look at the Leo area of your chart. That topic could feel stuck for a little bit via Gemini, but also with pressure coming from Mars in Leo, Saturn in Aries. Now, the Saturn in Aries story has not necessarily been completely revealed yet. Saturn moves into Aries tomorrow as I'm recording this. Moves into Aries on the 24th of May. So there may be something that's revealed over the next couple weeks that where you start to understand where that pressure point may come from. So sometimes we have to let the narrative unfold. Here's the other thing I will say about that. As astrologers and as fans of astrology, it's easy to fall victim and prey to astrological sensationalism. I've seen some things going around with people on the internet, other astrologers, etc., who really sensationalize these placements for clicks and for views and things of that nature. I try to avoid that. I think that I don't know if that actually is helpful for one's sanity. I think that there's a lot of different ways that things can play out. And sometimes the challenging things in our life actually lead to the biggest breakthroughs. And I know that that's hard to hear and accept in the moment, but if you truly believe in a divine plan, in a blueprint, even maybe in a benevolent universe, then most of these things are happening with larger scale cycles than sometimes we can experience in the moment. That's one of the things that I like to take away from difficult transits, is it's part of a much larger cycle and much larger narrative. Every great story has some kind of conflict to overcome, even if it's not life or death. You know, there's some kind of protagonist and antagonist, whether it's a person or like a journey that they're taking or a goal or a mission that they're trying to overcome. Some of the greatest stories ever written have some of the darkest things in them. Like I'm reading The Lord of the Rings right now. What if there wasn't a ring? You know, what if there wasn't a Sauron? I mean, it wouldn't be great literature. It wouldn't be an enjoyable story. It wouldn't lead to the acts of heroism that we see within that. So these are things to consider, especially as you're going through astrology. You can work yourself up into a lather with a lot of these things: malefic enclosures, planets in their exiles, squares, oppositions, etc. But try to see it in the grander scheme of things, if you can. Darren D says, so it's not the end of the world. I don't think so. And if it is, are we really going to know the difference? I guess that's one of my perspectives as well. You know, if let's say it all ended tomorrow, well, will we all be released from suffering? Maybe. Like, I don't know. I don't know, friend. I think that, like any great narrative, there's going to be some valleys. You know, there's going to be some real difficult, rough sledding, and we might be heading into a little bit of that. But I like really thinking about it from the perspective of one of my favorite people, Miss Fred Rogers. You know, he says, look for the helpers, right? When things are going south, how do you look for or become one of the helpers as we're going through these challenging times? Um, I would also recommend being judicious about our consumption of, you know, negative narratives. Not completely. This is not a call to put your head in the sand and to ignore things. That is uh, an other extreme that can lead to all sorts of atrocities. But how can you pace yourself, I guess, is what I will say. How can you do what you can do in that moment, but then sort of take a break and start appreciating the things around you? How can you take a walk and appreciate a flower, a tree, the wind, the blue sky around you? Uh, those are simple things that I think we have access to even when things seem their bleakest. Okay, let's keep going. We get to the 6th, we have a really nice thing happening here. So here is Venus moving out of her exile and into her home sign of Taurus. So let's take a look at that. So this is another one where we are really seeing a shift in dignity. You know, Jupiter's going to do this as well. It's going to go from its exile into its exaltation, and Venus is going from her exile into her own domicile. I've been really, despite feeling trepidation about Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, I've been really looking forward to Venus and Jupiter in Cancer. Just having both benefics in places that they prefer, in powerful places, I think that despite some of the real negativity that we are experiencing as a collective, there are going to be some beautiful moments as well. And it's all about a balance of vision and perspective. And I think that with Venus and Taurus, it's a great time to get outside, to appreciate the natural rhythms and resources around you, to take it maybe at a slightly slower pace, to start planning for your future. If you are lucky enough to have resources, Venus, especially in the first decan of Taurus, can help you to figure out the wisest way to invest those resources. And I don't necessarily just mean money. Let's say you have a few good friends. You could invest your time into those relationships, and those relationships could flourish and become more abundant. If you have a skill set, if you have knowledge, if you have books, you can invest your time in learning from those books and then doing something with that knowledge, sharing it with others. There's so many different ways to cultivate abundance that don't necessarily involve the almighty dollar. And we might be tested with these types of things as the belt gets tighter. And again, we're going to still have to do the things necessary to create equality on a larger macrocosm scale. But there are things that we can do to take back some of our agency with some of these things. I don't enjoy giving all of my peace of mind and agency to external forces, especially political ones. And I understand that is also a privilege, to be able to avoid some of the really nasty negative parts of that. But I know all sorts of people that live extraordinarily privileged lives and are miserable because they allow themselves to be cast about by the changes that are happening around them externally. And small shifts of perspective can make all the difference. So Venus and Taurus, a really nice way to, indulge in the senses, enjoy a good meal, enjoy a walk out in the woods, have a nap, go slower. Like if you're able to do those things, it can be very restorative. Let's see. D says far more is accomplished by standing still right now. Yeah, I agree. Sometimes that's the best action that we can take. Rachel says, I've been very nervous about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but all of the planets going over my 1 degree Aries midheaven have been surprisingly liberating. Oh my goodness. And it's an all-dog alert. Oh man, I've got a number of dogs next door, and I'm not sure what they're doing right now. You guys all remember Lady and the Tramp? The all-dog alert. I hope everyone's okay out there. Hold on a second. Well, hopefully they're getting the tramp out of the dog catcher. I think what was going on there is that some dogs in a car were barking at the dogs that live next door to me. So the all dog alert was on, right? But back to the task at hand, friends. Maybe this is the barking dogs that we have in our lives, in our minds, that are trying to distract us from the task at hand. And oftentimes those can be internal experiences, internal voices. Sometimes we have barking dogs in our external experiences, the barking dogs of the news, the barking dogs of politicians, the barking dogs of family members that are complaining about something. Well, it could be any of those things. And how do we sort of try to refocus and be able to accomplish what we're setting out towards? And as far as the Saturn-Neptune conjunction going over your midheaven, yeah, like anytime we have a planetary shift, right? Those changes can be sometimes just having any kind of change can be liberating, right? So maybe we're just tired of the same old thing. Maybe we're just not excited about what we've been going through in a particular area of our life, and just a planet there can just completely be the impetus for changing into a positive direction. All right. So here we go. Let's go forward to the 6th, or the 8th, I'm sorry. Go to the 8th of June. And on the 8th of June, that's a big day. We have a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction for a big couple days. I would say the 9th is probably the one that we've got earmarked. We've got the 9th, the 15th, and the 26th are really hot spots within the month. On the 8th, Mercury conjoins Jupiter at about 29 degrees of Gemini here. You can see this. And then immediately Mercury moves into Cancer. So an understanding, a conversation about what we need to let go of, what options are like, hey, this is just not possible anymore. As we will see when we get to the 3rd decan of Gemini, there needs to be a death of one of the options, metaphorically speaking, to move forward with what is our highest priority. So I think that there could be a really fruitful conversation about what needs to be released on the 8th so that we can move forward with Jupiter moving into Cancer and Mercury. So Mercury and Jupiter moving into Cancer within a 2-day period. So we get to the 9th and we have Mercury squaring Saturn and Venus squaring Pluto. So this is one of our sticky points for the month. Okay. So before Jupiter moves into Cancer, we are going to see Mercury making its square to Saturn. Okay. And then the double whammy with, oops, that's not what I wanted. Whoops. Oh. The double whammy with Venus squaring Pluto. So 2 pretty important squares here in the chart that are prefacing a Jupiter ingress. So let's try to contextualize this, because this is all happening within the same day. We'll talk more about Jupiter and Cancer in a second, but we'll have we'll have its own thing. So Mercury into the first 10 degrees of Cancer. Mercury is moving out of its domicile, okay, out of Gemini, out of a place where it has all of its resources, into the domicile of the moon. Our communications could get more emotional. We could have an emotional release. We also are starting to have an awareness, probably, of some of the limitations that Saturn might bring from Aries. Okay, all of these planets ingressing into Cancer are going to hit that square to Saturn. Now, let's just think big picture about Cancer versus Aries. They're both cardinal signs. They both initiate things. Aries tends to initiate self-directed, personal sovereignty, self-directed actions, severing and separating from a collective to individuate. Whereas Cancer, being ruled by the moon, Aries by Mars, remember, Mars severs and separates. Cancer collects. The moon collects things. It brings things together. It reflects. It is more associated with nurturing, with taking care of someone or something, a project even. So if you think of just on those terms, we have Saturn and Aries and Neptune. We are being bound. Saturn binds us to things. It says, here's your new responsibilities. We're being bound to make a new start that is maybe more independent without the support that we might be used to. And with all these planets moving into Cancer, that could put a lot of pressure on our family situations, on our ability to nurture something. Okay, the pressure that we feel to make an independent start could make it very difficult for us to feel safe, secure. It could make it difficult for us in one-on-one relationships. The first decan of Aries is very individualistic. It says, I'm going to sever from the collective and strike out on my own. I'm going to try to figure out what new area of life I want to conquer, so to speak. First decan of Cancer, as we will see later, Two of Cups energy, mutual beneficially, relationships, mutually beneficial, love, tenderness, partnership, one-on-one relationships. So our one-on-one relationships could be stressed by a need to strike out individually on a path. So something to keep in mind. Now, those opposites or those squares, they're not irreconcilable, right? There's give and take that comes with that. There might be some times where you have to do things on your own, and there might be some times where you have to do things as a team. But those two squares happening simultaneously. Now let's start breaking down Venus and Pluto squaring off. Now Venus is going to be at the degree of exaltation of the moon at 3 degrees of Taurus. So a fertile place for Venus. So we have all these resources. We have this fertility. We have this desire maybe to make a plan. But it's running headlong into Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius is bringing us all sorts of challenges around technology, around social issues that feel overwhelming. We've had a lot of, I have to choose my words carefully. We've had a lot of control or attempts to control the narratives, and through repressing other viewpoints. And I want you all, if you haven't yet, pick up the book A Tiny Universe by Joy Usher, because that's Aquarius 101, is almost the casting of a narrative that isn't of support of one viewpoint into complete and total darkness. And you've seen this in America with the attempts, like as I'm recording this, the the United States government has tried to limit the autonomy of Harvard University and their ability to their funding. They've limited their funding. They've pulled their visas for their international students. They want Harvard to teach one worldview, and they are saying you can only teach this one worldview. And if you teach something that we're not excited about, we're going to make you suffer. To me, it's a manifestation of, or it can be seen as one manifestation of Pluto and Aquarius, the control of a narrative. So we have things like that where we are running into resource challenges with that. Okay. And this could be another thing, like, for example, the tariffs that we're experiencing in the United States and globally. I guess it's a global issue because we're kind of the initiators of that. It's creating a scarcity mindset, right? A fear of scarcity. So the political corruption, the political oligarchical movement towards hoarding, like, right, may create some feelings of scarcity. Now, that is interesting because the first decan of Taurus shows us the 5 of Pentacles with 2 people that are kind of falling on hard times, and it talks about worry over resources. But the way out of that is through planning. So I think one of the things to do when you've got Venus square Pluto, try not to get too in the weeds with the political narratives. Even if those narratives are having a direct negative effect on you or your bottom line, you may have to shift perspectives as far as how you can manage your life. It doesn't mean you don't push back on tyranny, but how do we do that and also make the adjustments so we can survive at the same time? You know, sometimes this is change that we have to be flexible with. If we get so paralyzed by the fear of scarcity or of the fear of what might happen next, that doesn't allow us any agency to act. So how can we balance out our either disappointment or, you know, our experience of the more macrocosm challenges with also taking back some of our agency to be able to move forward, even if the resources that we have are more limited? So some really interesting conversations that we're going to have around the 9th. Now, that all is a preface, which is really interesting to me. Really interesting to me. Because that all just prefaces Jupiter moving into Cancer. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Jupiter and Cancer. First of all, it's in its exaltation. It is moving into a sign. Whoops, that's not what I want. There we go. June 9th. So we have Jupiter now in its exaltation, co-present with Mercury, moving into a whole sign square with Saturn and Neptune, with Saturn in the overcoming position. Jupiter is under the beams. So I do feel that with Jupiter under the beams in its exile in Gemini, that could lead to some difficult Jupiterian experiences, lack of hope, lack of faith, etc. I feel like something comes along in response to the negativity we're experiencing to bring us some hope. I say this because Jupiter obviously is moving into its exaltation, but it's also moving into its chariot, which means that it is protected from the beams of the sun. It means that there's something that starts shielding us from that heat, from that awareness of all of the negativity around us. Now, it's not going to solve all ills because despite moving into its exaltation, it is moving into that whole sign square with Saturn. So we may want to expand. We may want to nurture something. We may have decided what it is that we want to nurture into a full form. Okay. We've let go of those options that aren't for us, and we say, this is what's important to us. This is what I want to nurture. But we may have some external circumstances, Saturn and Aries, that are limiting the amount of growth, expansion, hope, faith that we experience. Does that mean that we will have none? I don't think so. But I do think that this is one of the moments in history where we can simultaneously be witnessing some of the most horrific experiences socially, but also that can lead to either some breakthroughs, or we could also have some nice experiences as well. You know, even people that are going through the most horrific tragedies, sometimes they're small moments that bring sunshine. And I would rather have Jupiter in Cancer squaring Saturn from its exaltation rather than have Jupiter not in good shape, not witnessing Saturn, even though Saturn's in a poor condition. Does that make sense? So it's a opportunity to keep your eyes peeled for the beauty in your life without ignoring the vulnerable, and without ignoring the challenges and the calls to action that we need to take to bring about fairness, equality, justice, etc. It's not an easy line. It can be really, really overwhelming to open up the news each day and to see more and more tragedies, to see more oppression, to see hardship, and really lots of questionable decisions being made, for problems being created for no reason. I'm shaking my head a lot at just the, one of the things that really affects me on a deep emotional level is protecting this beautiful planet, and just seeing all of the environmental protections and progress that has been made towards renewable energy being stripped in the last couple of weeks is really painful to me. That's one thing that is really, in addition to all of the other tragic things we're seeing, that one has been really something that's been getting my goat lately. But how do we, with whatever experience that really touches us, how do we make that move us towards action? In my experience, I've been doing a lot of things to restore native habitat in my own yard and in my own neighborhood and in my community, and to spread the word about it and to share the virtues of it. And that's a small action that we can take to counteract some of the larger macrocosm things that are trying to work against that. So, and a lot of those things through greed. So counteract greed with generosity, counteract destruction with creation of life. So these types of things, I think, are all sorts of stuff that we can start to work through when we see Jupiter in Cancer, like through the pressures that we're feeling, through the overcoming square, something beautiful could be born out of that, through the pressure that we feel. Remember the pressure that sometimes we look to nature. Through great heat, pressure, and time, coal becomes diamond, right? It becomes something beautiful. It becomes something hardened, something almost unassailable. And that's true too, because we have Jupiter coming into Cazimi shortly after this. So the pressure that you feel can lead to the birth of something potentially great. Okay, let's take a stretch break, and then we'll go to Gemini 3. We'll talk about the sun in Gemini 3. We'll bring this, you can take a look at this on the screen here. Do me a huge favor, stretch your legs out, if you've been hanging out with me, because it's a long one, you know, we're going to be hanging in here for a little bit longer. But do me a huge favor if you can. Please like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Spencer. I'm your local favorite, or friendly, maybe I'm your favorite, I don't know, friendly local astrologer. Or maybe you're just someone not local. You know, we're reaching each other from across vast oceans, and that's really cool too. In fact, that's something I really appreciate about our community here. So stretch out, get a drink, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and then settle in for some more astrology. Y'all doing all right? You having a good Friday afternoon? Finally got rid of our all dog alert. All right. So let's talk about Gemini 3. So this period of time is the portion of the month between the 10th and the 20th. So June 10th to June 20th. And here we see a decan, a 10-degree section of Gemini associated with the 10 of Swords. And in this card, we see the inevitability of all of those different options, ideas, hopes, dreams that weren't necessarily ready to be brought into fruition. The death of one of those twins, but through eliminating some of those options, you can see that this dusk, this dark cloud is starting to fade and the dawn is coming. So we've got this liminal space that is the dark before the dawn, and the kind of the lifting of the cloud through release. So the dark before the dawn, the death of one choice, sacrificing imagined pathways, being able to collapse possibilities into a single reality. I like that one because we've got all these different pathways we could take with Gemini, but here we're just really having to like manifest them into something that we want to grow into fruition. Dropping the spinning plates. We all have these spinning plates going in our life, sometimes way too many. And that can be really stressful trying to keep them all going. And then finally, releasing indecision. Oftentimes we don't want to make a choice because we feel like we're having to let go of something that we want to keep open-ended. And that can be confusing for ourselves and for other people. So questions to ask yourself with the Sun in Gemini 3. Which twin? Remember we have the Castor and Pollux story where one twin is mortal and has to give up some of the immortal twin has to give up some of his immortality so the other twin can live again after that mortal twin has died. So which option needs to die so that the other can live? Try not to focus on what you're giving up. I mean, mourn it. Maybe you can ritualize that grief, but feel excited about what you're infusing meaning and nurturing and energy into. Are you allowing for ambiguity or making ultimatums? This one's interesting because this is a solar decan. And the one thing about Gemini 3 is because we have to make a choice here. Oftentimes, this is a decan of high contrast, where to be able to make a choice, oftentimes what people will do is they will make the option that they aren't choosing, that they have to give up, wrong. I think this is a really important point. To be able to feel good about what we are saying yes to, we have to make the thing that we're saying no to wrong or flawed or evil. I think that is a mistake. Sometimes the choice that we don't choose is just different and it just wasn't right for us at the time. Sometimes the relationship that we're letting go of wasn't a terrible relationship. It just wasn't right for us at that time. That person wasn't a bad person. They just weren't the right person for us in that moment. And I think if we can own that and resist the lure of praxidike, the spirit in this decan, the executioner's sword of executing every single thing that isn't exactly what we are choosing in that moment, that can lead to much more grace, right? So be careful of making an ultimatum in this decan, because look at what happens to the sun. It switches direction when we get to the solstice. So you may make an ultimatum. You may kill off one of the twins, and then you're like, oh man, I probably shouldn't have been so black and white about that. Are you overthinking something? How can you balance hyper-rationalism with intuition? Important, because we're going to be switching from a hyper-rational sign in Gemini to one that is traditionally thought of as more intuitive with Cancer. So how can you prepare yourself for that shift? Where do you need to release the weight of knowing too much? This can be a sign where we have just too many ideas and thoughts. And sometimes the best way to create wisdom is to empty the mind and to slow the mind down and to understand that we're not going to know everything. We can't explore every possibility. There's just going to be some things that we don't know, and we have to make a choice anyway. How can you embrace closure and live with the consequences? This can be a decan of consequences. All the tens in the tarot and the decans associated with the tens, the final decans of mutable signs, often show us consequences of actions. And then finally, can you surrender to love and infuse life into your highest priority? Funnily enough, the next decan, Cancer 1, the Two of Cups, that's called the Lord of Love. So we just stop thinking and start feeling and start opening our hearts. We get out of the mind to overly in the mind and get into our hearts. And sometimes that can be the best way to surrender and to let go of all the anxiety that we create throughout this season. So let's go back to our chart and let's take a look at what will unfold. So here we are starting out the month with a full moon. Or is that not the month? We're starting out the third decan of Gemini with a full moon. So let's go to our full moon here. So here's June 11th, and the full moon is at 20 degrees of Sagittarius, and it's opposing the newly third decan Gemini sun. Now, that is interesting to me because we are dealing with, first of all, both of the sun and the moon are going to be hosted by two planets in Cancer. Okay, so both Jupiter and Mercury, the rulers of Gemini and Sagittarius, are in that first decan of Cancer. So this full moon, I think, will have some domestic tendencies, some emotional tendencies, even though it's in the hyper-rational, wanting to take action signs of Gemini and Sagittarius, respectively. They're both being hosted, albeit via aversion. Okay, these two planets are not witnessing the full moon, but they're the undercurrent. So maybe there's something within your family or within your relationships or places where you seek to feel secure, to feel nurtured, where you nurture others. And maybe there's something where you're carrying a burden that is great, right? This decan of Sagittarius, we were talking about this earlier, but it's represented by the 10 of wands, where you see a figure that's carrying 10 wands, 10 sticks. You know, he's putting his head down and he's trying to get her done, right? Maybe there's some project that you have to figure out before you can release the option. Maybe before you can kill one of the twins, you got to tie up some loose ends and you got to complete something. That could be the feeling that you have at this full moon, like just feeling the weight of trying to get to the finish line. You know, the opposition of, I don't want to do all this anymore, versus I've got to finish this one thing. I got to get this thing done. That's the balance that I think we start off Gemini 3 with, is you may not have the luxury of releasing something yet until after this full moon. There may be responsibilities that you have Like I know for me, like me and my partner, this is going to be the lead up to our Jupiter webinar. Sometimes those lead ups, like there's a lot of work that goes into that. And it's like, oh, I wish I was done with this. But you know, you have to power through when you are creating something that you want to pass on as a legacy. So think about what that means for you in your life. If there's some loose ends that you need to tie up, how are you going to dig deep to get it over the finish line, whatever that might mean to you? Scarlett, thank you for being here today. Scarlett says, this has been so great. Thank you so much. Sorry, I have to go. I'll catch you the next time. Thanks, Scarlett. Have a great one, and thank you so much for stopping by. I know we're going a long time here. If you've hung in for 2 hours, you guys are real ones. And yes, don't feel bad if you've got to like take it in chunks. My hope with doing the longer form monthlies is that, you know, if you want to be a part of the discussion, you can hang out for as long as you want during the monthly, but I hope it's a resource for people to be able to revisit over the course of a month to, you know, maybe you might not completely understand what the aspects are speaking towards in your life when we do it in advance. But if you go back and like, let's say you're in the future right now and it's the 11th of June and you're starting to really understand the context of the symbols that we're experiencing, that can be really valuable in that moment. And hopefully we're giving some practical advice to be able to weather whatever challenges that we're experiencing. So again, thank you for hanging out today. Okay, so that's our full moon. I will do a live stream about the full moon. So we will break that down in depth. I always do full moons, new moons, and then the monthlies. Sometimes we'll do some Q&As here and there, and we'll talk about some other aspects. But, you know, those are just convenient excuses, I think, for meeting up fairly regularly. I might have to pull back a little bit with some of these as far as extra ones. I can feel good about doing new moons, full moons, and monthlies. But I'm, again, just like all of you are trying to find space, I'm trying to find space for some things in my life too. So it's going around. So if we move forward to the 12th, here we have Mercury emerging as our evening star. So what does that mean? Well, here's Mercury at about 4 or 5 degrees of Cancer. And it is going to be moving outside of the 15-degree placement in relationship to the sun, where it is invisible. So within 15 degrees of the sun, you can't see Mercury at sunrise or sunset. When it gets outside of that degree of separation, Mercury becomes visible once again. And that was called a moment of phasis, an omen that speaks. So pay attention to messages that you receive on, you know, June 11th, obviously after the full moon, and into the 12th, because here we're gonna let's move it forward one more day. There you go. Now you can kind of see, you'd see it a little bit clearer that way. Yeah, actually it's about 6 degrees that it's separating. 6 degrees is the degree of Cancer that Mercury is in, while it's separating by 15 degrees. So messages regarding what you need to feel nurtured, messages regarding your relationships, how you also, the first decan of Cancer often is related to understanding what we love, understanding what we desire. So you may have some messaging and some ideas about what you really feel passionately about. First decan of Cancer is like, it's attraction. It's a Venus ruled decan. You know, what are you attracted to? What do you really want to infuse your time and energy and resources into to bring to fruition? Do you want to nurture a relationship? Do you want to nurture a project? Do you want to nurture a community? Do you want to nurture a garden? You know, all of those things can be ripe for discussion. Then we get to the 15th, and this is one of our sticky points in the month. So here's June the 15th. And it is a pretty big experience. Actually, let me talk about one more thing before we get to that. As Mercury is emerging as the evening star, we also have the sun, let me just look at my notes. The sun is at the bending of the nodes slightly before that. So you can see here at about 22 degrees of Gemini, the sun is at the bending of the nodes. That to me has become very significant. So as Mercury is emerging as the evening star, the sun is going through the bending of the nodes, and we're moving away from the north node of increase and starting to move towards the south node of decrease. So as all of these planets hit the bending of the nodes, we had Mercury hitting the bendings, we had Jupiter hitting the bending of the nodes. I think we're starting to release. We're starting to let go of things. We're at the peak of expansion and maybe the peak of an awareness of all the things that we want to do. And now we are realizing we can't do them all. We got to start consolidating. So I think that if we want to pass on a legacy, if we want to preserve what we've been doing, that we have to make choices. So this could be one where we're making some choices, especially around our identity, around that. You know, the sun gives us an awareness of purpose oftentimes. So we may be aware of what we want to, what kind of purpose we have, especially towards moving towards preservation of something we want to pass on. Okay, so then that gets us to the 15th. Now this is a big day. I'm going to go to like noon here so you can kind of see it all. All right, couple things. So this is the Mars-Uranus square. There's Mars-Uranus. That alone would be fairly disruptive. But in addition to that, we also have Jupiter squaring Saturn, exactly perfecting. This is a tough, I think this could be a tough day, a tough weekend. Just a couple things just for context. The president of the United States has his ascendant is at 29 degrees of Leo. So take that information as you will. It's also his birthday the day before this. And from what I have read, he's planning a large North Korean style military parade. I don't know if that's a real thing or not, but that's what I've been hearing. And I don't know if people are going to be super thrilled about that, having basically a display of authoritarianism in a country that is ostensibly supposed to be based on freedom and equality. Although many of us all know that is an ideal, but not necessarily the reality. I think that there could be some sticky moments in the collective. Mars-Uranus squares tend to be acts of violence or something that is negative, or severings or separations that come up unexpectedly. If we think about this in our personal lives, we have to be careful of doing something rashly. Okay, think about the third decan of Leo as a decan that is about defending authenticity, or defending your power, like defending your throne. This is one thing we do see with the president, is he is vehement about defending his position in life, whatever that means to him. And Mars can make a person very aggressive about that. Uranus and Taurus often represents something that is a humility in the face of nature, something that is outside of human control. And I think that this could be an interesting square as far as wanting to defend authenticity in the collective and in our personal lives, but then having to be humbled by something. I think this is an aspect of humility. Now, the Jupiter-Saturn part of it is interesting because we've been talking about Cancer 1 and it representing love, nurturing, relationships. Jupiter there is the begetter of many children in myth. Okay, Zeus is somebody who is able to work with the blueprint that Saturn gives it to bring form into reality. That's pretty interesting. That to me is something that has kind of blown my mind, that Charles Obert talks about in 7 Traditional Planets. He talks about Saturn giving us sort of like the idealized forms, the blueprint itself, the plans, and says, here, this is what you can, this is the idea of a horse. And Jupiter says, I like that idea. I know that a horse has a mane and 4 legs and a tail, and I'm going to make one that's brown. I'm going to make one that's white. I'm going to make one that has spots. I'm going to make one that's purple. I'm going to make one with a horn and call it a unicorn. Like, he's just begetting from that form, from that blueprint. So if we look at the relationship between Saturn and Jupiter in this arrangement, Jupiter's ready to go. He's like, I'm pregnant with possibility. I want to create. I want to sow my seeds. But the blueprint that Saturn is giving it, it is not in the greatest condition. It's one of self-centeredness. It's one of authoritarian power, right? So that is something to meditate on. Is Jupiter is ready to beget multiplicity of form, but the actual architectural blueprints that we're drawing on might not be of the greatest quality. So a point of meditation. We've got some comments rolling in here. D says, June 15th, perfect day for me to embark on my new career as a supervillain. Something a bit contrary, I think. Obviously, no follow-up, though. Yeah, there you go. It would be a great day to commit to super villainy, potentially. Oh, man. We're living in wild times. Darren says, wow, I like that. Saturn is blueprint. Yes, perfect. It really is a great way of thinking about it. Because then you could see the relationships between that. Also, here's another viewpoint to think about. In myth, Kronos, aka Saturn, was the father of Zeus. And Zeus was hidden away and then wanted to overthrow and liberate his siblings that Kronos had consumed to prevent himself from being usurped from power. So this is another way of looking at this. And this isn't really just a fascinating, just like in real time kind of stream of consciousness about it. I feel like we have the old ruler in its fall who is trying desperately to hang on to power. This old guard, this old wealth and power and homogenized worldview. And it's applying to Neptune and just like completely batshit, like crazy, delusional, etc. What I like about this arrangement is that Jupiter as liberator is becoming empowered, right? Jupiter is at its strongest, even though Saturn is in the overcoming position. Saturn is in power, right? The resistance, the liberation is becoming exalted. Now, here's just think about this for a second. You see how this could play out. Think about people watching a fucking military parade in the United States that mimics something straight out of North Korea. and how that might be maybe, hopefully, the final straw for people to be like, holy shit, we've descended into fascism. We need to do something about this, right? That's the type of thing I could see, like where it's so fucked up the vision that we're seeing, that it just ignites that liberatory influence of Jupiter, of Zeus, to be able to purge the people who have been cast into exile through being consumed. I mean, look at the exiles that we have in the United States right now. We literally are eliminating due process to send people to an internment camp in El Salvador, right? That's Saturn consuming its children. And how do we liberate the ideals that have led to that? And I really think it's a powerful moment. And it might be through something shocking too, like with the Mars-Uranus square. Now, this is all a preface to Jupiter Cazimi. So I pay very close attention to the imagery that you see during this weekend, because it will be, I think, the spark, the impetus for the birth of a liberatory movement, in my opinion. Heather says, Mars will conjoin my sun while squaring Uranus. Oh my gosh, that sounds stressful. You got this, though. You got this, Heather. You're so strong. You've been going through it, but I know you can do it. D says, check supervillain manifesto. Yeah, right? Yeah, could be. Heather says, I'm struggling to follow the rules as it is with my Uranus squaring my sun. Mars is going to make things super feisty. I hear you, Heather. I am not generally a shit stirrer. I would say the last 5 minutes of this podcast has been fairly inflammatory, but everyone has their breaking points. And as much as like I'm trying to be super chill about trying to maintain my own center and equilibrium, it's upsetting what's happening. It's upsetting. It's upsetting seeing people being erased, equal rights being thrown in the garbage, universities being attacked for having the audacity to want to decide what they teach, themselves without having to be controlled by an authoritarian regime. Seeing advancements in the real necessity to combat climate change being thrown in the garbage at the whims of billionaires who already have more than they need for 1,000 lifetimes, and just putting even more pressure on people who are suffering and who are having struggling with poverty and with their rights evaporating in front of them. The audacity of white supremacy, it's ugly. It is ugly. I think it's gross. And as someone who values diversity and a universal global perspective, the American first kind of mindset makes me nauseous. And I hope that some of these things, maybe it's a Jupiter in Cancer or whatever, inspire people to hold on to those liberatory impulses. And it doesn't have to necessarily be through supervillainy, like Darren is saying, like Dee is saying. I think here is the Cancerian revolution. It's coming from a Cancer himself, a Sun and Mercury in Cancer. What if the revolution is not a violent revolution? You can't meet violence with violence. I don't know how many times I can tell you this. As someone who has weathered violent attacks, mentally, physically, emotionally, from a difficult narcissist in the past, you can't meet violence with violence. It just doesn't work. I'm sorry to say that it just ignites more. What if the revolution that we're talking about here is one of kindness, generosity, sharing, of actually caring about your neighbor and working with them together to create mutual flourishing and abundance, of recognizing that there are so many different beautiful facets to the prism that we live in as a society, and that every different color that comes out of the prism is valuable, a valuable part of the whole, right? What if the revolutionary act is radical kindness, radical reciprocity and sharing? What if you're inspired by the ugliness of authoritarianism, fascism, and self-centeredness to do more in your local community to create relationships that flourish, that help? I mean, to me, that is the radical act in these times. It's not violence. It's not getting on your bullhorn and trying to be louder than the narcissist. It's simple. It's simplicity. It's caring. It's sensitivity. I mean, from the mouth of Cancer to hopefully to Jupiter's ears, or really oppositely. This is just maybe Cancer is, or Jupiter maybe hopefully will be speaking through me. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. D says, ruler of the golden age, this Saturn, yes, right? And even older ways coming through after an old ruler falls. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't necessarily, I don't know if this is an event that speaks to the death of a ruler or something like that. I don't like calling that type of thing into existence. But yes, I can understand like being nervous maybe about even more regressive tendencies from the next in line, which is even a possibility. Jupiter seems strong in the Young Turks, 7-9 Eastern Time. I think I can see a lot of rebellious sentiment being reported on there. Yeah, I think so. There's opposition out there to the current regime. Again, I think that my form of rebellion is peaceful. I understand that may be idealistic. I had a conversation with Painted Turtle about, well, they were bringing up my Mennonite ancestry, and Mennonites were pacifists, and that's I think that runs through my blood. But I understand people's feelings and acknowledge them. Just I have learned that under great duress, in situations where I felt very powerless, meeting violence and anger with more violence and anger only perpetuated it more. And meeting that with love, but also healthy boundaries and steadfastness, those are the ways that I got through to the other side of my own personal overcoming of tyranny. Kai says, from your lips to God's ears, that this is a time when people actually wake up and fight against rising fascism. I hope so, Kai. I think we're still in the shock, kind of phase of this. Some people are. I don't. It's hard for me to really put all of this into words. It's definitely an inflammatory topic, and it should be, because it's horrible. But I'm struggling with well, are we surprised that this is happening? Like, are we, like, lots of us have known that this type of thing has been happening for decades, that America has had a mask of freedom and of generosity, and just to cover up some of the pseudo fascism that was more hidden, but not necessarily unmasked. Now it's just kind of unmasked, and some people are shocked by it. I'm not super shocked by it. I'm still horrified by it. So I'm struggling to figure out, like, how to speak in those terms. But I do think your average citizen probably going through some stuff right now. If they haven't been paying attention to history and things like that, they're probably like, huh, this is not how I expected this to turn out. Like, and yes, I agree. I think waking up to something, but counteracting, authoritarianism, fascism with appreciation of freedom, appreciation of diversity, appreciation of the things that unite us is super important. D says, Cancer rising. Looks like I will have to return to my original retirement plan as a cult leader. Maybe. Well, we'll see. I don't know how well that pays, but yeah, you do you, bud. Underdog Tarot says, yes to all this. I hope that you all are finding some value. I try to be as objective as I possibly can, but I'm with you if you're feeling upset about the way things are headed. I just want you to know that I'm with you, and I see you as somebody who is committed to the beautiful different expressions that a human being can take, a form that essence is permeates through all of us, no matter the diversity of form. I get really upset seeing people get so fixated on form that they have to make a form wrong. So I see you. D says, I hope you are right, Spencer, or else we're going to see a lot of bloodshed in the Middle East in another 80 years' time. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to unpack all that. It says, I don't mean a death. I mean a potential fall of the elite and being replaced with a more community orientation. I hope that happens. That would be great. I'm in favor of that. I'm in favor of the fall of the elites and a replacement with community orientation. So I hope that happens. Laura says, speak it. I'm trying to do my best. Darren says, the Young Turks are also peaceful. Let me just add that. They believe in taking a yes for an answer from people who you vehemently disagree with on other issues. Yeah. I think leaving space for people who maybe have fallen into the delusion, giving them space to heal and to come out of the haze of a charismatic leader is important. Because I know these people. These are some people in my own family that have fallen under that illusion and delusion. And leaving space for the good to come back and for them to realize that wasn't exactly what was going to lead to their happiness is important. Leave space for people that you disagree with to see the error of their ways, and don't force it from them either. Like, just be strong in your kindness and open with your heart. Taku, what's up, Taku? Says, I guess the rebellion will become more intellectual once Uranus enters Gemini in 6 weeks. Yeah, and we'll get to that in July. That's going to be really fascinating too. Ideas are going to definitely be shifting for sure. Underdog says, I like your solutions. I try. We'll have to live into the answers, and I'm not the ultimate authority with any of this, so my solutions are going to be only part of the solution, and we'll see where we go from here. Yes. Heather says, bizarre that another Cancer rising said humanity's error is empathy. That is weird. I agree, Heather. That is a weird one. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if I have enough insight into the interworkings of Elon Musk's mind to understand where that's coming from. But I do know that he comes from a background, he comes from apartheid, and he also comes from great wealth that exploited people. And oftentimes when you gain from exploiting other people, it's almost like you have to turn some of that off in your brain. You have to turn the empathy switch all the way down to justify the things that you're doing to benefit yourself. That's something that I have really struggled with I don't know if struggled with is the right word. It's something I've been mostly unwilling to do in my life is turn the empathy dial down to benefit myself. And I've had to, I've missed out, quote unquote, missed out. And I mean this, I don't know if I've really missed out. I've missed out on what people would traditionally see as opportunities for success in late stage capitalism because I wasn't willing to do that. I've had moments where I've fallen short of the glory. That's absolutely true. I'm not perfect, but there has been lots of just saying, nope, that's not for me. I have to just go my own way. And if maybe I won't get as rich or as famous because of that, but I'll be able to sleep at night and look myself in the mirror. So we all make choices in life. Okay, let's keep going. Sorry for our long digression there, but these are important moments in history. And I think it wouldn't be authentic of me on this channel to not acknowledge the real feelings that a lot of us are trying to process. You may not agree with me 100% about either my political views or my methods or the solutions, but I do think it's important to be honest with each other about what we're feeling. Okay, so we've talked about the sun at the bending of the nodes. We've gotten past this 15th spark powder keg day, and that gets us to Mars in Virgo. Okay, so if we look at Mars in Virgo, we have a couple things that are really interesting about this. First of all, and I think most importantly in my mind, is that this actually starts, this ends the malefic enclosure of the sun. Now, I tried to explain, the malefic enclosure, but now we're seeing, we're not seeing an aspect that is enclosing the sun anymore here. We are sending the ray on this side of the sun, and then we're sending this ray over here, but it's cross sign, and I believe Jupiter is starting to break that up. So something to consider. Mars in Virgo, paying attention to the details, being fastidious, more meticulous, putting our drive towards learning a skill. I think it could be something that really comes up. I think that this is a placement where we feel much more like we have to take action to learn something and to gather the resources and knowledge that we need to move forward. Dee says, I'm really glad I was here tonight. This discussion is well worth happening. I appreciate that, Darren. Dee, I think that being honest with each other is a gift. And I will say this, I love the phrase, let's agree to disagree. And if we get to points that are sticky, I don't know. We don't have to justify our conversations today. They're happening, and like, yeah, that's what's real. That's what's going on today. So let's just keep on going. You know, sometimes I do this. I try to like please everybody. I'm kind of over that. I'm kind of tired of that. Like, you can't please everybody. You know, it's impossible. And if what I've said today makes you upset, then you're on the wrong side of history, friend. Like, I'm sorry to say. Like, if somebody here is like, that fascism looks great, and we should make everyone suffer that doesn't look exactly like me, then, well, fuck you. That's what I feel. Okay. All right. So let's go. Mars and Virgo. We're moving towards the details, the meticulousness of the details. We're moving out of having conflicts over identity. And maybe our conflicts are coming over how to do something, the form that something takes, right? the ability to infuse an idea or a mission into matter, right? This is a placement where we are really starting to get into the granular awareness of like the little things, and we can have conflicts over the little things. So be careful when Mars is in Virgo about having a conflict over how something is done, and try to still connect with the essence of why you are doing it. All right, let's keep going. Man, you can feel Saturn in Aries coming, can't you? It's a different vibe. We're already starting to transition into it. So June 18th, we have our last quarter moon. Here we go. Now we have the sun in Gemini squaring the moon in Pisces. And this is a last quarter moon is one where we're letting go of dreams that aren't necessarily meant for us. You've got the sun still hanging out in a decan of Gemini that is related to the death of one choice. And the moon in Pisces 3 oftentimes speaks towards going the distance for an ideal that we have, a sacrifice. Now, I was reading, I like, of course, reading Austin Coppock's book, 36 Faces, and he's talking about when the moon is waning in Pisces 3, it's about letting go of ideals, letting go of unhelpful desires, ideas, etc. So this is one where we're kind of letting go of something, letting go of a dream that isn't tenable, letting go of a fantasy, or even letting go of martyrdom, right? Where we're letting go of something where we are becoming a martyr to some kind of ideal that isn't necessarily suiting us anymore. Think about this too. This is really an important moon phase right before before a Jupiter Cazimi, because Jupiter is a planet that is related to belief. So if we're letting go of old beliefs that don't serve us anymore, then we're being renewed, Jupiter, our belief system, in the heart of the sun. So I think that's a nice little synchronicity. So that gets us to the sun in Cancer 1. Let's take out another stretch break. Let's do it. Oh, man. Do me a favor. If I haven't driven you all away with my honesty today, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. You know things are getting rough when your friendly Cancer, Taurus, Moon astrologer is starting to swear on his podcast. It's exhausting, going through it. I appreciate you all being here today, though. Appreciate you holding space for each other and for me, too. I'm a human being. I have strong feelings about things just like anyone else. And I try to be centered and whatnot, but, it's painful sometimes being incarnated in this body and witnessing all the ups and downs and the roller coaster that we experience with each other. But one day at a time, right? Okay, let's finish this off with the sun moving into Cancer. Taku says, I like these stretch breaks. It's my reminder to stand up and refill my water bottle. Yeah, I like stretching too. I have been sitting too long in this chair, and sometimes we have to shake, like shaking off some of the stiffness. If we're going to spend all this time together, we have to move our bodies so that we don't feel too stagnant. Okay. So Cancer 1, June 20th, we're going to go and we're going to bring up the decans of Cancer. And we've been talking about this pretty much the whole show today, so we're not going to dwell on this too much. Julien's here. What's up, Julien? Nice to see you. Hope everything's going well. You're way down there in Arizona. It's nice to see you, my friend. Cancer 1, Two of Cups, the Lord of Love. Austin Kaba calls this mother and child. We have a spirit called Nike, the goddess, the winged goddess of victory, in this decan. You know, this is a big shift from air to water, hyper-rational, getting stuck in the mind, and then grounding our experience in our emotions, in our hearts, right? So this decan is a lot of themes, this Venus-ruled decan, a lot of themes of nurturing, maternal care, emotional awareness. Chokmah is a sephira in the Kabbalistic tree of life that is this flash of insight and awareness. This could be a flash of awareness of, oh, I really like this. I really love this. I really feel emotional about this. Union of body and spirit. Think about the thema mundi as the Cancer is the rising sign of the thema mundi and the union of body and spirit, right? Romance, falling in love, those butterflies in your stomach that you feel can be associated with this, that tingle of awareness, of attraction. Appreciating beauty in others, becoming aware of someone else that you love or appreciate. And being able to manifest harmonious relationships is a superpower, especially of Venus in this decan. So questions to ask yourself when we get to the summer solstice. What do you need? What do you need to feel nurtured? What do you need to feel good, right? How can you support and feel supported? How can you offer your support in a balanced way so that you're not giving to your own depletion, or you're not taking towards someone else's depletion? What new passion is attracting your interest? This is important too. Sometimes with this decan, you're like, oh, I'm really excited about this person, place, thing, band, etc. How can you harmonize your relationships? This is a good time to spend some time with your loved one if you have them, if you're lucky enough to have a partner or friends or whatever, or your cat, whatever it is that brings you joy, that is an other that you feel love for. This is a great time to embrace. Is this pairing mutually beneficial? A good question to ask when we have planets moving through Cancer. And then finally, how can you infuse essence into a body? This is really the transition with Gemini to Cancer, where we have to eliminate some of the options and then nurture the choice that we've made into its fullest expression. So let's go through the dailies for this. All right, so the first day that we have, June 20th, with the sun in Cancer. Let's go to the solstice. Let's just look at the solstice chart real quick here. Ingress of the sun. There you go. I like this ingress chart specifically for the moon being in Taurus. The moon's going to ingress into Taurus before the sun moves into Cancer. So we have this beautiful sextile between the sun and the moon and Jupiter. Mercury is going to be back in bounds as the sun moves into Cancer, which maybe will restore some sanity after probably a really, to be honest, probably a fairly chaotic beginning to the month. The only challenge in the ingress chart, really, or the main challenge, I guess you could say, we've got a beautiful Venus in Taurus, we've got a moon in Taurus, we've got sun and Jupiter in Cancer, but we still have that overcoming square with Saturn in Aries and the Neptune as a part of it. So that's always going to be kind of the elephant in the room, is that we have this, like I said, this social blueprint that we're drawing on that's very flawed, that is not necessarily one of reciprocity. It's one of selfishness. It's one of anger. It's one of aggressiveness. It's something that we really kind of have to watch out for. And it can, I wouldn't say pour cold water, but it can light a flame of negativity when we're trying to work through a tender experience with Cancer 1. So just be careful of that at the ingress of the sun in Cancer. When we move forward to the 22nd, we see Mars sextiling Jupiter and the Sun squaring Saturn. This is the, we've got a fairly innocuous sextile with Mars and Jupiter here. The ability to take action on some of the hopes and dreams that we might have, on the ways that we want to feel nurtured and supported. But again, this other experience here, the Sun squaring Saturn, really it's just something we're going to be working through for the month of June, is all of those Cancerian planets squaring Saturn and Neptune. So I will say this, let's move let's think about this in context, because we're going to have the Sun squaring Neptune on the 23rd, after Mars sextiles Jupiter and the Sun squares Saturn. And then that all is leading up to this Jupiter cazimi on the 24th. So we could talk about this in context of this. Here's this Jupiter cazimi on the 24th, and then the new moon in Cancer on the 25th. Okay. So the Jupiter cazimi, the renewal of Jupiter in the heart of the Sun, is coming with and off of a square of Neptune and a square of Saturn. I think that we have to be very careful when we are examining what wants to be born about over-idealization of a relationship, of our independence within that relationship, or whether we're going to be able to act under or need to act under our own power. This is kind of the quintessential, I don't know, challenge between wanting to have space and wanting to be close and together with something. And I think that that's something we have to really watch out for during this Jupiter cazimi. We could be really wanting to move forward with nurturing something into fruition, but the external circumstances are just creating some roadblocks. I guess I would say this: how do we continue to create and beget like Zeus or Jupiter? How do we continue to create liberatory practices, right? Birth a liberation movement, whatever it may be. But how do we do that in the face of the limitations that Saturn and Aries is going to provide? One of the things that people have been fearing is the institution of martial law, right? So think about that on some level. We want to expand, we want to create, we want to embrace abundance with Jupiter and Cancer. But let's say you're trying to do that, but within the limitations of an authoritarian regime. That's difficult. There's limitations to that. So I'm not exactly sure how to do that, because I've never lived under a total authoritarian fascist regime. I mean, again, we've had it sort of masked, right? We've had the undercurrents and the undertones of that, but never has it been this overt. Never have we had freedom of speech be so limited, or so much intimidation, really, towards anyone who has a viewpoint that is contrary to the ruling class. Now, there's been moments here and there, but it's never been this uniform, I think, in my lifetime, or my experience of it. Your experience may differ based on your personal events that have happened in your life. But that, to me, is another part of this, is how do we work within the limitations of our social contracts to create and to birth something new? Not an easy answer, and not an easy square. This is tough astrology that we're going through, right? Our lives have gotten complicated, if they weren't already. Julian says, oh, good, a little bit crazy. A lot of moving parts these days with work and the kiddo. Good to catch a snippet of your life. It's good to see you here, Julian. I hope everything's treating you well. And happy birthday, if you had a birthday recently, I believe. Gemini. I know you're Gemini. Don't remember exactly your birthday, but if your birthday is coming, happy birthday. If I missed it, happy belated. Okay. So again, when we're thinking about Jupiter cazimi, I'll make it purple because Jupiter, Zeus has some associations with the color purple. You want to not only look for this action in your Cancer house, but you want to see how it's going to have an effect on your Sagittarius topic and your Pisces topic. So this could be a rebirth, not only in your Cancer topic of life. In this Capricorn rising chart, a relationship rebirth that could have a positive effect on your local community, your neighborhood, etc. And also maybe your feelings of solitude and regeneration with the 12th house. But there could be pressure from your domestic situation, from your home or something like that. It's putting pressure on that. So the way to do astrology great, in my opinion, is context, 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 integration, integration, integration. It's really, really difficult to just look at one aspect in a vacuum and not try to contextualize it with the other things going on in your life. That's just not how life works. Life works as a tapestry of interrelationships, and the planets are no different. You know, the planets are having conversations about all sorts of different things in your life and creating fate and inspiring fate, bringing you things to react to, all of those things. Okay. So that's our Jupiter cazimi. We'll probably be talking about this more as we move forward. But that is sort of one moment of renewal. And I really think that the changes that we feel inspired towards making are really going to hit when we get to this new moon on the 25th. That's when all the elements and the seeds can be planted. Like you might have the discussions around the 24th, but then you can really like see the seeds being planted the next day at the new moon. And I feel like this is a fairly fortunate new moon with Jupiter cazimi, with, again, the asterisks of Saturn in the overcoming square. I never enjoy telling people to manage their expectations because I think we need more dreamers in the world. But sometimes if you manage your expectations and realize that there may be there may not be as expansive of a seed that you might want to plant, it can lead to less disappointment in the future. So know that there will be some limitations that we're working within with this very, very powerful Jupiter cazimi, new moon, basically. So there can be some great things, but it might have to be within the context of some more difficult limitations. June 4th, Julene says, oh my goodness, June 4th. So you're coming up. You got a birthday coming up with Venus sextile Jupiter and Jupiter going into the beams, Julene. So many happy returns to you, and I hope that it's fortunate for you. Taku says, I'm really looking forward to that new moon. It's right on top of my MC, my midheaven. I think it could be something really fortunate. Jupiter still can do good even with Saturn in the overcoming square. Yes, there will be challenges, but Jupiter's still Jupiter. And Jupiter, even though Saturn's in the driver's seat, Jupiter's really powerful in Cancer. Saturn's really weak in Aries. So think about that for a second. I think Jupiter's on the right side of the law or history or whatever it is, even though Saturn is empowered right now in Aries by being in the overcoming position. So I just think our faith, our ability to be kind, our ability to plant new seeds can still happen because Jupiter is in such a marvelous sign position. Okay, a few more things and we'll wrap it up for the day. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Thanks for your patience and for your contributions intellectually and commenting in the chat. And thank you for allowing space for some of my own feelings and frustrations to come out as far as just the absorbing of suffering and me trying to process that in real time. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to process. Okay, Let's keep going. June 26th, we have an active day. Okay, there's multiple things happening on June 26th. So June 26th, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. Angela, nice to see you, says, I love fuck you as an Italian. My country knows well what fascism is, and it was born there. The discussion about violence and or not violence for a revolution is a deep philosophical topic. Yeah, yeah, Angela. And again, I don't have the complete corner on the right answer for that. I know that sometimes that we have no other choice, and I totally appreciate that. And yeah, it's humbling, to hear from other people in other countries who've really experienced authoritarianism and fascism and things of that nature, and it's scary. It is scary, and it's frustrating, and it's ugly, and sometimes the only way to express your feelings is a hearty fuck you to those who are trying to hurt people, right? That's where it comes from. It comes from caring. Sometimes we give a fuck, right? And sometimes when we give a fuck, we have to say fuck you to someone who is hurting people. But ultimately, it's rooted in, I think, love. I hope it is. I hope that we can continue to plant our fuck yous in the soil of love so that they can grow into a tree of love. All right. 26th, Mercury sextile Uranus. And the Sun sextile Mars, which is significant. Generally, we wouldn't get too, excited about a sextile. Mercury sextile Uranus can give us some interesting ideas, here, like about what to do with our excesses with Mercury in Cancer 3, whether to give away things or to pass on a legacy to somebody. Sun sextile Mars. This is another point in the chart where we can take action on our ideals, on what we see in the world and the spotlight that we have, on nurturing and caring. And this is significant, though, for another reason. And it is the beginning of a malefic enclosure of Jupiter. And here is, oops, let's get rid of this and go over here. Let's take a look at this, because this one is, I think, probably one of the more significant things of the summer. So here is Jupiter, and what we're going to see once Mars makes the sextile to the Sun, okay, it is going to be unable to break up the malefic enclosure from Saturn and from Mars. So before this, the Sun was interceding to break it up. But now, as we move forward, Mars is going to be casting its sextile ray on one side of Jupiter, and Saturn is going to be casting it on the other side. So putting pressure on Jupiter until August 1st, which is crazy. So we plant this seed. We have Jupiter Cazimi, but then our ability to move and manifest on that vision is going to be probably held in check for a month, right? So let's say we go on that liberatory journey with Jupiter. We understand, let's say we have an experience where we know that we have something we want to liberate from, all right? And we like, all right, we feel passionate about creating this new thing. Well, manifestation isn't always immediate. Sometimes there are lots of things that you have to do behind the scenes to make that a reality. Like, let's say you wanted to create a liberation movement of some sort. There's all sorts of organization that has to happen behind the scenes. There has to be communication. There has to be a unification of purpose. There has to be infrastructure involved with all of that. And it can feel frustrating when we know where we want to go, but we don't necessarily have all the T's crossed and the I's dotted yet. And I have a feeling that's probably the experience of Jupiter throughout the end of June and throughout July, is that we know all the elements that we want to bring forth this new nurturing, liberatory start, but we're feeling pressure from the social tyranny with Saturn and Neptune and Aries, and with the skills necessary to make it all work with Mars and Virgo, right? We might have to educate ourselves. I think that's part of this, is we have to start learning new techniques for communicating, for experiencing, for crafting and structuring society. When capitalism, when late stage capitalism descends inevitably into what we are experiencing now, hoarding and fascism and oligarchy, we have to kind of try to imagine a new construction for society. And it doesn't happen overnight. You know, like even if all of the infrastructure crumbled in a day or two, you have to do the hard work of rebuilding it into something that is more fair, equitable, and beautiful, and it takes time. So I just think that this is just like we have sometimes to wait and take the actions that we need to take, but then let some of the process play out. That's what we need to do with our Jupiter impetus, our new beliefs that we're trying to integrate. I think a lot of people are getting a wake-up call. A lot of people in my country, United States, they're coming to an awareness that this wasn't the country they thought it was, or at least that we've been told the narrative of what we stood for, right? And everyone's at a varying different level of awareness with that, and that is totally okay. And yeah, Julene says a hearty FU. Yes. We're expressing strong emotions today. We're expressing our frustration on some level. And I think I'm just tapping into the zeitgeist right now. Like, I got that moon on the midheaven and people are angry. People are upset right now. And I feel it. I feel it in all the cells of my body. You know, Lauren says one of the more beautiful things about your cast is witnessing you processing your emotions, Spencer. You continue to provide that lens, no matter how difficult it may be to digest the big things. It brings humanity to the astrology report, and I'm here for it. I appreciate that, friend. And thank you for being here, and thank you for your wisdom that you bring to. Lauren sent me a really interesting set of information articles about Pluto going out of bounds later in this year, and sent me a lot of information about Standing Rock and a lot of the stories of, defending the water and the land and the indigenous sovereignty, which I'm fully in support of. Like, I think that the way that indigenous people in this country and in other countries around the world have been treated is horrific. But what I liked about what Lauren sent me is Pluto out of bounds. We haven't even really talked about that because it's not going to happen for a little while, towards the beginning of fall. But it can either mean a period of great tyranny when it's in the north out of bounds, like we're talking about, like the Holocaust kind of experience, 1938 to 1953, if I'm remembering those dates correctly. But it also, when it goes south out of bounds, which it is going to do for the next kind of on and off for the next 10 years, starting in the fall, it talks about an uprising of more empowerment to the people, revolution, rebellion, etc., which I'm kind of excited to see what unfolds there. So thank you, Lauren, for bringing that to my attention and for witnessing me processing my emotions. And yes, they are big things. These are big things we've experienced. This is the most intense kind of historical stuff that I think I've experienced probably since probably since 9/11. I think that was another moment in history where your eyes were like shocked into like, oh wow, this is not the narrative that we've been given. This is it was that was an I was much younger then. I was much younger then, and that was a big wake up call. I'd started to learn about that was coinciding with me learning about the School of the Americas. I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but there's a basically a training place where we train like soldiers from other countries, like South American regimes, and then send the soldiers back into their countries to be able to promote interests that are beneficial to America. And I was learning all about this with like the story of Adorno, I believe a priest in, I believe it was El Salvador, but I can't remember, a Jesuit priest and his liberatory movements. And that was right around the same time that the World Trade Center events happened. And it was just a lot to process, because when you grow up in America, there's a lot of, well, there was a lot of propaganda around America being the world's like savior, police, etc., and mother. And I don't know, it's always been kind of there's a lot to unpack with it. And we're seeing kind of a reckoning now of the challenges around that. And don't get me wrong, friends, like there are good people everywhere. There are good people there's some good people in the American government. There's some good people. There are good citizens in America. There are good citizens in every country. When we're criticizing some of these things, I think it's important, and this is part of my processing part here, talking about Jupiter and malefic enclosure. I think it is worthwhile. I think it's important to punch up. And by that I mean we can be critical of power structures, right? And we can be critical of institutions and ideas. And yes, we have to hold people accountable that uphold those corrupt institutions, ideals, etc. But I do think it's important to kind of like think about these things in the macrocosm way, because we're really dealing with big issue stuff right now. Oh, thank you so much, Julian, for the super sticker. Appreciate you. You're always so generous on this live stream. Thank you so much for your support, my friend. Julian says, Virgo, boots on the ground. I feel it coming. Yeah, well, we need all hands on deck, right? Or all feet, or all boots. Everyone has a different skill set to be able to craft the next version of society that is more just, right? We need people who have technical skills, the Virgo boots on the ground. We need people that feel things deeply. We need Cancerian feelers. We need Capricorn organizers. We need Aries people that get angry and fired up and fire other people up. We need Tauruses that are calm and centering. We need Geminis that can communicate these ideas, and so on and so forth. Every sign person has a role within all of this, and it's really beautiful to see. Lauren says, we're coming to terms with a level of peace privilege with the North Node in Pisces. Amen to that. I like that word. I've used that word a lot, peace privilege. I use that in my, I talk about that even in my own prayers. Like sometimes I'm really grateful for just the peace that I've experienced, How much personal peace are we willing to sacrifice for the promise of peace for the whole? We'll be called to answer that question with this nodal passage. And by peace, I mean levels of comfortability as well. Great observation. And it's tough. I struggle with that sometimes. I struggle with that. Being comfortable is something that, as a Cancer Sun, Taurus Moon, like much of my life energy goes towards being comfortable. I understand that I have an enormous privilege as a white male heterosexual American, and that I'm allowed to be comfortable, more so than other people that have to work much harder for it. And I really, really try not to take that for granted. And I have a beautiful partner who has not had that same privilege, being a Black woman in America, and trying to really like just hear her perspective and her experiences and understand them and integrate them into my own worldview has been really it's been a great learning experience, and learning about other maybe blind spots I may have had about other experiences that people have. And um, I think that how do we let go of some of the attachment to comfort? That's a great question in meditation, Lauren. And one day at a time, right? um, Darren says, and Darren's nickname is D, so I call him D sometimes. If you hear me call him D. The same struggle is happening over here, just fortunately without guns. Interesting, right? Yeah. Tracy says the same struggle in the UK. This is universal. And I know that America's on the forefront right now because we have a narcissist in charge of our country who makes it about him all the time. But, this is a universal global phenomenon right now. These themes play out in Europe. These themes are playing out in Asia. These themes are playing out. Astrology doesn't just pick and choose which country is going to feel these influences, although some of you astrocartography people might argue that a little bit, but we're all, working under the same sky. Yeah, and the guns part of it is interesting, right? Because it definitely changes the dynamic. That's one thing that Americans love is their firearms and their right to possess them. And it's a lot to process. Okay, so we've got this Jupiter enclosure, malefic enclosure, June 26th to August 1st. Saturn in the overcoming square to Jupiter, Mars sextiling it. Take your time, do what is necessary, and then allow the process to play out. As we've learned, as I've talked about today, if you try to force something, you could make the problem worse. So my advice as a Taurus slow mover is take your time with the changes that need to happen in your life. Yes, there will be some circumstances where you don't have the luxury of taking your time, but sometimes we can create time. I've learned that this is a skill that you can cultivate, is the creation of time. You may think that you don't have time, but you really have to audit what you do with your time and create it and make choices about it. Okay, that same day, Mercury moves into Leo. So after the malefic enclosure starts here, then we've got, and after Mercury sextiles Uranus, it moves into Leo. Okay, so here is Mercury into Leo at the end of the day here in the afternoon. And now it is being hosted by the sun instead of the moon. Okay. Communication will maybe dry out a little bit more, be slightly less emotional, and be more fiery, maybe more subjective. Potentially, we're asking a lot of questions about our visibility. Okay. And we have Mercury coming into this opposition with Pluto. All right. So this, anytime a planet is ingressing into Leo, since Pluto has been in Aquarius, we have this opposition of like individual rights versus collective needs, visibility versus invisibility. Visibility is a really important question that we're working through right now, because we have forces that want to make people invisible. We want to have forces that want to get rid of diverse perspectives. So this can bring up the tension of the individual rights and the individual multiplicity of perspectives versus this like repression or oppression of those voices. So speech could become more flamboyant around this period of time, and we could see people getting much more fired up verbally, right? It's less about expressing an emotion and more about potential expressions of pride or of maybe even authenticity. Sometimes Mercury in Leo can express from authentic feelings rather than ones that are designed maybe in Cancer to bring people in, right? In a collective way. I have Mercury in Cancer, so my communications, I'm always kind of thinking, how is this going to land with whoever I'm talking to? Like a sensitivity. A lot of the pauses that you hear is I'm thinking about, how does this going to feel for someone else when I say this? But Mercury in Leo, there might be less concern with that potentially. All right, and then at the end of the month, just a couple more things, and then we'll wrap for the day. Mercury is going to trine Saturn, and then it is going to trine Saturn and Neptune over the course of June 27th to 28th. Okay, we've got the Mercury trining Saturn in Aries and Saturn in Neptune, and then we have Mercury opposing the Pluto in Aquarius. Mercury opposing Pluto in Aquarius on the 30th, and then entering its retrograde shadow. So these are the degrees right after the opposition with Pluto that we're going to retrace in the Mercury's retrograde in July. So we have both Mercury and Saturn stationing retrograde, and Neptune, if you're following that, stationing retrograde in July. So again, this could be some really intense conversations, maybe even feeling a little bit scared about being visible with Mercury opposite Pluto, and reevaluating our visibility with Mercury in Leo retrograding in July, and asking a lot of questions about, well, where do we need to utilize attention and where do we need to avoid attention, which are important questions to ask in these very strange times that we're living through. Okay, so just a preview of July. Venus is going to be transiting through Gemini and Cancer in July. Uranus, that's the big one. Uranus is ingressing into Gemini. So it's a big shift. Like Uranus changes signs roughly once every 7 years or so. And this is going to start the Uranus return of the United States, which has coincided with some disruptions, to put it lightly. Saturn and Mercury are going to station retrograde, as well as Neptune, and then the Sun will be moving into Leo. So we'll talk about that next month. But that is what I've got for you. We do have an I-Ching for the month, and let's bring this up here. So our I-Ching for the month, great power. I feel like this is like Spider-Man, right? So Uncle Ben on his deathbed basically says, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's true. Like when we become empowered, or when we are thinking of becoming empowered, we have a great responsibility to act with the interest not only of our own interests, but the interest of the collective in mind. So when I ask what the essence of the astrology of June 2025, it says great power, the power of the great strength, using your power wisely, using strength with justice. So it says great power, it is beneficial to persevere. That's the judgment. It says you have enormous power and influence on the situation now. But the secret to great power is knowing when and how to use it. And the moral responsibility of great power is to use it only for good purposes and not simply to attain selfish ends. This might also be the square with Saturn and Aries, right? You know, the desire to be empowered with the Jupiter Cazimi, but this feeling that we have to protect our own interests because everyone is creating these narratives of scarcity with one another, right? The situation has great potential. You can achieve a great deal now, but do not become reckless or overconfident. Perhaps you think you hold all the cards, or that you can bully your way forward to get what you want. Sounds like Saturn and Aries to me. But if you become aggressive and try to impose your will on others, you will simply create resistance and opposition. A leader should read the I-Ching. You should carefully consider how other people will be affected by your actions and what would be in the best interest of everyone before you go ahead. Exercise caution and circumspection. The proper use of great power is a matter of timing, patience, and care. Amplify your strength and influence. Recklessness and carelessness dissipate them. Very important, especially when we're talking about social movements. Recklessness and carelessness will dissipate your impact. So patience and timing and organization is really important when you're moving forward with those things. Wait for the right moment to act. If you rush ahead and try to force matters, you may well make everything worse. And I'm thinking about, like, protests. If you rush into a protest and you run headlong into the oppositional forces, the authoritarian forces, ultimately you might slow down the movement through maybe getting arrested or getting injured or getting hurt. Like, they're it's a long game, is what I will say. Long game. And I know we're going to feel really amped up when Saturn moves into Aries, and we're going to feel ready to fight, but we have to let cooler heads prevail, even in the midst of trying to change a corrupt system. It says, if you rush ahead now and try to force matters, you may well make everything worse. Even if you do prevail, ultimately, acting aggressively at the wrong time may make your ultimate victory much more difficult to achieve, or much less happy or fulfilling when it arrives. Great power is truly great, not when it is vast or mighty, but when it is used in pursuit of something good and just. Great power that is exercised selfishly degenerates into tyranny. Great power exercised thoughtlessly degenerates into chaos. If you find yourself in a position of strength and influence, let your conscience be your guide. Don't allow yourself to be moved by greed, self-indulgence, or vanity. Do not act on impulse, and do not lord your power over others. Rather, simply decide what is right and do it without arrogance and without letting yourself be distracted by irrelevant or petty considerations. Unite strength with justice, influence with integrity, and power with principle, and you will achieve something that is truly great. I love that. The I-Ching is, man, the I-Ching's on point today. All right, this is great. Bonnie, what's up, Bonnie? It says, hello, good to see your face and hear your voice. All green around your grounds. All the green around your grounds. Oh, good. That's my favorite color, Bonnie. This is the Taurus moon, the Venus-ruled moon. Yeah, Julene says, strong message with our 34. Absolutely. I think it's the most important message right now is we feel that we want to make a change. We feel angry, upset. We feel even revolutionary impulses, but we have to be focused. We have to be grounded. We have to be organized. We cannot let our actions add to chaos. What we are trying to do is create how do I phrase this? If you meet chaos with chaos, you're just multiplying chaos. If you meet chaos with organization, you're starting to restore proper order, right? Order that is peaceful, that is actually revolutionary, that creates the structures of humanity and society that help us to help one another and to flourish mutually and to create mutually beneficial relationships. So I think it's really, yeah, a deluge of kindness, Heather says. I love it. Yes, absolutely. I'm into that. And we can let off some steam every once in a while too. Like, appreciate all of you holding space for me, letting off a little bit of steam today. But I love that, the deluge of kindness. Speaking of a deluge, here is our animal to help guide us through this. It's the starfish. Look at these little starfish here. So we've got the starfish. And I'll read you a little bit about starfish because there's an equally important message from this book that I like, Animal Frequency by Melissa Alvarez. It says starfish symbolizes hope, courage, and confidence. Starfish isn't a fish at all. It's more closely related to a sand dollar or a sea urchin. There are more than 2,000 species of starfish. Most have 5 arms but can have up to 40. It has hundreds of tube feet underneath the arms. Instead of blood, the starfish uses a water vascular system to pump seawater into its body and to the tube feet so it can extend them and hold prey. Muscles retract when the feet are not in use. This means you are a master of finding unique ways of doing things to achieve your desired results. It also means you don't let opportunities pass you by. Instead, you reach out and grab them with both hands and hold tight. A starfish has talents towards beauty, empathy, experience, good luck, guidance, hope, inspiration, intuition, light, longevity, movement, observation, optimism, persistence, and regeneration. Its challenges can be controlling, defensive, emotionally needy, and manipulative. When starfish appears, it means you are looking at life in black and white instead of seeing the colors around you. This is great for Gemini 3, by the way. Starfish doesn't have a brain, but has an eye spot at the end of each arm that looks like a red dot. With it, the starfish can see light and dark. This means you're only seeing life in black and white. You may be taking things too seriously when they're meant in fun. Surround yourself with people with colorful personalities. You have a lot of confidence that you will excel in whatever task you undertake. Starfish can pull apart a mollusk shell with its arms, then eats it backwards. Its mouth is tiny, so it pushes its stomach out through its mouth, digests its dinner while it's still in the shell, and then pulls its stomach back inside. This is an ingenious way to partake of a larger food source. It is a reminder not to overeat and to use your manners at the table. Starfish also reminds you not to be too controlling with people. It's your nature to pry things open, but sometimes you have to let others open up to you instead of forcing them to let you see inside. Use finesse when interacting with others. Starfish assists you when you need to start over. Starfish has the ability to regenerate a lost limb. This is, I think, the most poignant thing. When you need to begin again, maybe we lose something when Jupiter goes under the beams, but we can regenerate that with the Cazimi. When you need to begin again, Starfish can guide you as you rebuild your life and to replace anything you've lost. It will not be exactly the same, but it can be better than before. When dramatic changes happen, there's always a reason behind it. Just like Starfish, you may not see it well at the time, but it will make itself known one day. The top part of many starfish is tough and leathery and has spines to protect it from predators. This same toughness protects you during transitions. Starfish can live up to 35 years, which speaks of learning through your life experience. Starfish is connected to spiritual truth and can help you on your spiritual path. Like Starfish, you are unique, inspiring, and beautiful. I love that it's a creature of the ocean too, since we have this beautiful Jupiter Cazimi in Cancer. Starfish, you see these in little tide pools. And Cancer, the crab, is another animal that lives on the borderlines, on the shores, the transitional, the liminal spaces. This is another animal that I think represents those liminal spaces. So if we lose something, we will have the ability to regenerate that. And through letting things come to us, through finding unique ways to find resources, to digest things in our life, right? Maybe there will be difficult circumstances where the traditional ways of creating abundance aren't going to work anymore. The late stage capitalism ways of living your life aren't going to work anymore. But you can find new ways. You can find maybe more communal ways to create abundance within your life and find unique solutions to challenging problems. So I love it. This is a great animal here. Oh, thank you so much, Laura. Thank you for your generosity. Appreciate you today, friend. Like I said, you and Julene are always been so generous. So thank you so much for that. Paintings by Mare says, Soldiers of Love. I love it. I love it. That's great. I love that starfish photo. Painted Tarot says, yes, it's great. It sort of reminds me of Stranger Things a little bit, but I thought it was whimsical. Like the what is the Stranger Things, the Demigorgon, like it's hearing how they're described as eating. It's not probably that far off, but they are beautiful little creatures, aren't they? 40 arms, yes, exactly. All right, friends. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Thank you for being part of this community. Appreciate you. Appreciate your support. Thank you for holding space for each other in the chat and being kind to one another. Thank you for holding space for the wide range of emotions that we are hopefully allowing ourselves to feel, even if they're not always nice. Sometimes if they're ugly or angry, thank you for holding space for some of my own negativity today, my own negative emotions and expression that I had to maybe purge out a little bit. Appreciate you being here. I do think we can default back on kindness, though. We can purge those emotions and then let in the good feelings, the kindness, the hope that we're experiencing or hopefully experiencing with the Jupiter Cazimi. So start with that foundation. Be kind to yourself first. If you are integrating the self during Gemini season and owning the shadow, owning the things that make you upset and trying to work on yourself and integrating the lost parts of yourself, that can make it so much easier to extend that kindness out to others. So that's what I've got for you today. Thank you so much. Appreciate you all being here. Have a great June. Have a great rest of your week and weekend. And hopefully we'll get through all of this together intact and better off for it. So be kind to yourself, be kind to one another, and I will see you the next time. Peace.